could be the one to save a life. Find the hero in you.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, March 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 0. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Younger seniors now eligible to book their appointment for a COVID-19 vaccine through the province's online system. With the details, here's Kevin Meisner.
People in Ontario who are 75 and over can start booking their first COVID-19 shots through the province's online portal, which opens this morning. The schedule may be slightly different in some other areas of Ontario that have their own booking system. Also starting today, pharmacies and family physicians in Toronto, Kingston and Windsor. Those are the 3 pilot project areas for the AstraZeneca shot. They can officially administer the AZ shot to anyone over the age of 60. However, again, some pharmacies began doing that over the weekend. I'm Kevin Meisner.
Diplomats were barred from attending Michael Kovrig's trial today in Beijing. Former diplomat trial on spying charges follows Friday's trial for Canadian businessman Michael Spavor. Jim Nichol is the Canadian Embassy Deputy Chief of Mission and was repeatedly refused entry to observe the proceedings in Beijing today.
Michael Kovrig has been detained for more than 2 years now. He's been arbitrarily detained, and now we see that the court process itself is not transparent. We're very troubled by this.
Chinese officials say the trial must be conducted behind closed doors due to national security issues. City News Time, 9:01, and now the forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Temperatures well above average again today. Lots of sunshine, very mild. The high near 17 degrees. The average high is about 4 or 5 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear, -1, and tomorrow, sun and clouds, 17. That's the high today, 17.
And right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 0. The pandemic has caused restaurants, both big and small, to operate quite differently than normal. Ottawa Lone Star is no exception. Being mostly dine-in during before the pandemic, Lone Star now had to reevaluate its menu items to make sure they were still suitable for takeout. This, as Lone Star CEO Mark Finlay tells City News, the biggest impact COVID-19 has on the chain.
The biggest thing is people. Hospitality is a big employer, across the country. And the young women and men who work in our restaurants in the front lines have basically been through 2 or 3 waves of this now, where we've opened and closed and opened and closed, and the constant change has been the most difficult thing to manage.
Now, he also feels the improved takeout systems implemented during the pandemic will help with recovery when restaurants are allowed to again fully reopen. City News Time, 9:03. As many small businesses lick their wounds from this COVID pandemic, Smiths Falls is actually seeing new businesses open as existing ones adapt to their new reality. We get more from City News reporter Jason White.
Businesses in downtown Smiths Falls have had a year of adaptation, turning to delivery and curbside pickup.
They really rose to the occasion. Some of our restaurants teamed up with Valley Eats.
Aaron Spory with the downtown Smiths Falls BIA says there have even been new businesses opening during the pandemic, and restaurants are getting a helping hand from Town Hall.
Our town waived the fees for the patio bylaw. So that's fantastic.
While many have been left discouraged by the latest COVID restrictions, Spory remains confident that her members will continue adapting and thriving. Jason White, City News.
And I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
I am liking spring a lot more than winter so far. Let's keep this going. Not going to be a record breaker today, though. The record daytime high for this day, March 22nd, 24.9 degrees in 2012. Jill Taylor says we're going to hit 17 today. Environment Canada says 15. Tomorrow, Jill says it'll hit 17. Environment Canada says 18. The record high for tomorrow, 19, again set in 2012. I guess we were having a mini March heat wave in 2012. The average daytime high for this time of year is only 3.7 degrees. So whatever this is, climate change, I will take it. Give me some more of this. Good morning. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News. Hope you had a great weekend. Thank you for giving us part of your Monday morning. I think you'll be glad you did. We're jam-packed until noon. All sorts of coverage, analysis, opinions on the greatest, biggest news stories happening right now, like the vaccine rollout. As you just heard with Andrew in our newscast, the City of Ottawa announcing this morning, starting today, all Ottawa residents aged 75 and over, that's born in or before 1946, can begin booking appointments to receive the vaccine. Now, nationwide, looked this up just moments ago, nationwide, Canada is now closing in on 4 million doses administered of vaccine. 4 million. It's 3.9 million, according to the Bloomberg Vaccine Tracker. 3.9 million doses in 98 days. This is a great victory, ladies and gentlemen, 98 days. The first vaccine doses were administered 98 days ago. Now, meantime, the Americans are now doing 2.5 million doses a day. 3.9 million in 98 days in Canada, 2.5 million in 1 day in the United States. In the UK, they did 750,000 doses yesterday alone. That was a new record. The Canadian numbers, now they continue to inch higher. Canada, as a whole, is now averaging 132,000 doses a day of vaccine. 132,000 doses of vaccine, which is about the same as the state of New York. New York State, though, 25% of New York State's population, 25% of New York State's population has had at least one dose of vaccine, and 12.4% have had the full 2 doses. 12.4%. In Canada, just 6.3% of the population has had at least one dose of vaccine, 6.3%, and only 1.7% of the entire Canadian population has had 2 doses. 1/4 of the American population has had at least one dose of vaccine. And 13% of Americans are now fully immunized. So, yes, the Canadian numbers are getting better, and thank goodness for that. But the reality is our accomplishments do not come close to what is happening just a few hours south of here. But nice of them to send us some vaccine. Thanks for that. Can we talk pipelines next? We're going to get into all the latest COVID-19 news. Red zones, lockdowns, case counts rising, variants of concern on the rise. New case count for Ontario in about an hour from now. But the number of people dying from COVID-19 is on the decline. Welcome news. And there's also big news on data for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Going to get into all of this with Dr. Isaac Bogoch. He is part of Ontario's Vaccine Task Force. Clinician, investigator, Toronto General Hospital Research Institute, faculty member, University of Toronto, all around very, 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 very smart person. Went to Harvard, does TED Talks. Okay, we're in good hands. He's not YouTube certified. He's Harvard certified. We're also going to look back with the help of Tim Powers, Vice Chair at Summa Strategies. We look back at the just concluded policy convention for the Conservative Party of Canada. Given we could be into an election in a few weeks, maybe a few months. And I really want to ask you some questions about the Conservative Party when we do the talkback hour this morning. And we do that every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. An hour of phone calls, an hour of opinions, an hour of hearing from you. At 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. It's all over the political media this morning about what the delegates to the Conservative Policy Convention did when it came to climate change, when it came time to have a vote on climate change during this policy convention. There was a motion to have the party's official policy say something like, climate change is real. Okay? Climate change is real, and the Conservatives will take action on climate change. Climate change is real, but that was the starting point. Climate change is real. And it went down in flames. The Conservative Party, the delegates to this convention, had a chance to be on the record and support this idea, climate change is real. And there was a vote, and most of the delegates voted against it on the line, climate change is real. And then on the line, and the Conservatives will act on it, solve the climate crisis, etc. So a lot of people are saying that, could you gift wrap it any more for the Liberals? It's all well and good for the leader of the Conservative Party, Erin O'Toole, to say the debate on climate change is over and the matter is settled. The fact is, delegates had a chance to back him up on that and vote on it. And, they weren't in a cooperative mood. Climate change is real. Defeated at the Conservative Party Policy Convention. Climate change is real. Defeated at the Conservative Party Policy Convention. So as you can imagine, there's been a lot of ink spilled over that vote in the last day and a half. You'd think you'd do well enough to get out of there without having a vote on abortion. But I guess this is the next best thing. If you're the Liberals, they're probably planning to fundraise off it already. And there are a lot of people, I'm not one of them, but there are a lot of people who think this position, this hard no on the need to fight climate change, that it's doomed the party for the foreseeable future. That the Conservative Party doesn't have a hope in heck of winning the next election with a policy like this, with a hard no on the need to fight climate change. It's not going to win the next election or the one after that or the one after that, as long as it takes this hard line, the denial line, some people are calling it, on climate change. So I want to get into this with you this morning. My friends on the right side of things. Just because the delegates voted that way, maybe that doesn't stop Erin O'Toole from coming up with all sorts of pronouncements in an election campaign about how the Conservatives are going to fight climate change, how the Conservatives would lower carbon emissions, how the Conservatives would get Canada to net zero on carbon emissions by the year 2050. I guess my question for you is, do you want them to even try? How important, this is my question, okay, for the talkback hour this morning. How important is a serious climate change plan from the Conservative Party of Canada? You have a lot of people who are saying they will never form government again as long as this is the party stance on climate change. Can't even get past the idea whether it's real or not. Is that how you see it? How important is a serious climate change plan from the Conservative Party of Canada? Would you say it's very important? You must have one? Would you say, well, yeah, you got to have a few lines in there. It's important. You have to have a few lines in there. Or would you say, it's not important at all. I wouldn't waste 5 minutes on it. Look, I know a lot of you cheer for the blue team. You want the blue team to win, right, in the next election? A lot of people are saying that's not in the cards now because of this vote that happened at this policy convention. I don't know if it's all of that, but I would like to know if you think this party needs to step up Wake up. Smell the fair trade coffee. And be serious when it comes to the fight against climate change and make carbon emission reduction goals and have a plan to achieve them and have a carbon tax or a price on carbon or a price on pollution and declare a climate emergency, and the next time she's in Montreal, go march with Greta. Okay? Should the Conservatives do all of this, do some of this, or do none of it? Love to get into that with you this morning. And just a few words about what happened outside the home of Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson. Mr. Mayor, let me say I'm very sorry and disappointed and angered to hear that happened to you, because no one should suffer that sort of ignorance, hate, and bigotry. And I know this isn't the first time that's happened to you. You've told me that in the past, that has happened to you. Similar things have happened to you. The idea that it happened outside your home, your own sanctuary, disturbs me all the more. There's no place for that in Ottawa. I know you, Mr. Mayor, will rise above it. And you know the vast majority of us, residents of Ottawa, we have your back. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
I always knew I was going to own my own business, and I've always wanted to have a store. And I sort of figured when the right concept came together at the right time, I would move forward with that plan. And so through doing some environmental initiatives in the restaurant group that I was with prior to opening this store, it just triggered my path towards being more environmentally conscientious and wanting to make more of a difference, and hopefully encouraging, inspiring other people to want to do the same, at which point the idea for All Eco was born. I have some really fun products. I have a really wide spectrum of products. So the things we look for in terms of qualifying products are sustainably made, upcycled, recycled, zero waste, all natural, no harmful chemicals to like the environment or to our bodies. We have like fun stuff, so like really clean burning candles, lots of really natural body care and skin care. I put a real emphasis on Canadian products. I really try to support up and comers, and I always source Canada first. The refill bar is really important to me. It's really huge. I think that's been exciting as well, because I thought it was going to be a real process in convincing people that this is a better way to go. And actually it was just like right away there was a built-in affinity towards doing refill, which has been great. We closed, I think, probably we were closed down by before the second week of March. Just didn't feel we could comfortably or confidently stay open, even though I do sell essential products, like in terms of the cleaning. But we just didn't feel we could make a safe space for ourselves or our customers at that time, and especially with the information we had at the time. So we did close our doors, at which point I did not have a website, because that was I hadn't even scheduled myself to have a website at that point. So that was sort of like full speed moving towards that and trying to drive the business, at the same time still get myself on the map because I was so new. So during that time, as we were building the website, we were still doing a lot of video shopping and private shopping, online shopping, like online phone, text. Any way I could do business, I was doing it. And there was really a nice show of support for my business during that time, which was really, really encouraging. And now, we are fully set up online too.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Starting today, Ontario adults over 60 can get the AstraZeneca vaccine at doctors' offices and pharmacies. The AstraZeneca shots are offered right now at a little more than 300 pharmacies in 3 regions of Ontario: Toronto, Windsor, Essex, and Kingston. The Ontario government has said over the next 2 weeks it should become available at an additional, yet to be disclosed, 350 pharmacies across the province. So I'll get a little more into this with the CEO of the Ontario Pharmacists Association, Justin Bates. Welcome back to City News this morning.
Good morning, Rob. Great to be on your program.
Yeah. How's it going so far? How would you describe things?
Well, it's going well from the perspective of being able to move the initial allotment of the AstraZeneca vaccine through the process and getting them into arms. But we still are experiencing high demand and not enough supply. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge that we face as we look at not only expanding, but replenishing the stores that are participating now.
Right. So how does that manifest itself, say, in a local pharmacy? Have pharmacists had to turn people away, for example?
Well, there has been some that are out of the 500 that they received a couple weeks ago. Others still have appointments available, so it'll depend on the location of the pharmacy in the various regions that are currently launched, that being Toronto, Kingston, and Windsor. So it won't be one size fits all in terms of what's left, but I think those that have been working together to ensure that if they are out, they're sending patients to a location that has ample supply.
Okay, but still, the big thing is supply, right? And securing adequate supply so that everyone who wants one can actually get one, right?
Absolutely. So what we have to do is to continue to maintain the priority populations and work through that. At the same time, we need to make sure we have enough supply as we look at booking the second doses of those that just got their AstraZeneca in up to 16 weeks, as well as we expand to make sure there's equitable access across the province. So we know there's 1.5 million doses on their way from the U.S. What we don't know is how many of those are coming to Ontario and when, although we anticipate that clarity in the next week or so.
Okay. As you know, the AstraZeneca vaccine itself has been in the news for all kinds of reasons. Whether it's supply issues or most recently concerns in some European countries, for the most part, about blood clots. There were questions about its efficacy in seniors. All of this seems to be cleared up now, and a lot of the European countries that had stopped doing the shots have resumed doing the AstraZeneca shots. I put it to my listeners last week, this hypothetical: what if you're in the vaccine clinic and the person tells you you're going to get the AstraZeneca shot? Some people told me they would prefer to get another shot. Now, I'm sure a pharmacist is probably trained to deal with hesitancy, whether it's childhood vaccines or annual flu shots. How do you overcome something like that? What kind of training is there in a pharmacy setting to deal with vaccine hesitancy?
Well, we know it's a real issue across the board, as you mentioned, and particularly with the results of what we were hearing with the AstraZeneca vaccine. But I think the key is that there's lots of information available, on what your healthcare professional does, including pharmacists and their staff, is to inform their patients of the risks and benefits, and to make sure that they're getting the most recent information in their patients' hands. And we know now that the AstraZeneca vaccine, all 4 of the vaccines that are available, are safe. They're very effective. And in fact, the AstraZeneca vaccine has increased in terms of its efficacy because we now have real-world evidence to go on. So it's now up to 79% effective against any mild symptoms, and it's 100% effective, as they all are, in preventing serious symptoms and preventing death. So the key is getting the vaccine that you're offered when you're offered it. I think that's we're going to keep people safe and bring an end to this pandemic. So whether it's the Pfizer, Moderna, or AstraZeneca, and in the future the J&J, We are looking at mixing in some Moderna now into the pharmacy channel, which will give more supply as we roll out, and I think that's going to be key. But I think the vaccine hesitancy has always been there, and we're addressing that with lots of questions from the public.
Okay. In terms of eventually getting to the point where a shot could be given at just about every pharmacy in Ontario, how are we doing at that goal, achieving that goal, Mr. Bates?
Well, is it
realistic? Is it realistic to do that?
It is, yeah. Once supply is available, we have a shared goal with government and our members to get this out to all the participating pharmacies. There's 3,200 that participate in the flu program every year, and that's our target. And that would give us a footprint in every community, rural, remote, urban and suburban, and really increase that access and convenience to get the vaccination rates much higher. It's all going to be based on how quickly we can scale up based on the supply. So right now our plan is we're going to add 365 pharmacies over the next 2 weeks. We've gone through a process to select them based on a robust methodology with the Ministry of Health to make sure that we have coverage in all the different communities and that it's equitable in terms of the mix of pharmacies. And that'll end up expanding to another 800 pharmacies by the end of April, and that'll bring us to about 1,500. Into the late spring, early summer, I would expect that to continue to ramp up, where we would end up with about 3,200.
3,200, okay. It's been reported that, and we've actually had people call into my program and admit that they did this. They drove from Ottawa. They made an appointment in, it was a Shoppers Drug Mart in Kingston, both of them, who called me and said, I was able to get a vaccine dose at a pharmacy in Kingston. I met all the requirements with the exception of I don't live in Kingston. But that wasn't one of the questions. Do you live in Kingston? It was just, do you live in Ontario? But Kingston Pharmacy's giving out 3,000 shots or so to people who drove in from other health units. What do you think about that? Is that okay?
It certainly was an early challenge because the guidance provided by government to pharmacies was the only criteria to check was the age restrictions between 60 and 64, now 60 plus. And that put pharmacists in a tough position because shortly after the initial launch, a few days later, we did hear about stories of people region hopping, and there was a strong message from the government to discourage that. And the challenge we have is we don't want any wastage, doses that go unused, and there is an expiration date for this initial shipment of April 2nd. And also, it's hard to turn people away, especially when you have available appointments. So it did put pharmacy professionals in a difficult position to try to manage that, but we did send out messaging to discourage that behavior because we know that, you know, with the different zones and the risks of community spread, we didn't want to encourage people to be driving from one zone to another.
Right. Thank you for your time this morning. Great to hear from you. Look forward to the expansion of this to our neighborhood pharmacies.
Thanks for the opportunity to be on your show.
Thanks again. That is Justin Bates, the CEO of the Ontario Pharmacists Association. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, March 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 4 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 8. Here's what's making news this hour. As of today, anyone aged 75 or older in Ontario can book their COVID-19 vaccine. Up until now, the minimum age was 80. The province is a couple of weeks ahead of schedule in its vaccine rollout. The trial for the bus driver charged in connection with the Westboro crash begins today. 44-year-old Asatu Diallo is facing 38 charges, 35 of them for dangerous driving causing bodily harm, 3 for dangerous driving causing death. Police Services Board meeting this afternoon expected to deal with a number of issues, including the annual report on violence against women and the report on human rights and racial profiling. The chief will likely talk about the recent incident involving the mayor when someone spray painted a homophobic slur on the street in front of Jim Watson's house. The meeting gets underway at 2 this afternoon. Canadian diplomat Jim Nichols spent his day in Beijing, just waiting on a sidewalk outside a courthouse for any information on the trial of Michael Kovrig. He was put on trial today on spying charges, as was the case with fellow detainee Michael Spavor, and that trial on Friday, Canadian officials were barred from the courtroom. Nichols received no information on what happened during the proceeding. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Budget week in the province of Ontario. Let's find out what the opposition New Democrats are hoping to hear from Mr. Bethlen Falvey, the Minister of Finance, later this week. The Ontario NDP finance critic is the MPP for the riding of Waterloo. Catherine Fife joins me this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
It's very nice to hear from you. So it's Wednesday, I believe, is Budget Day.
That is Budget Day, yep.
In Ontario. What are some priorities for New Democrats?
So we, first of all, thanks for having me on. We are going to be looking at some strategic investment in keeping people healthy so that we can keep the economy open. I think that what this pandemic has taught us, Rob, is that, when we have outbreaks and when we have people who, have to go to work even though they're sick, the health and well-being of those individuals and their communities impacts the entire economy of Ontario. So we are going to be looking for some strategic supports to protect jobs, investing in keeping people healthy. You will know that we have been fighting for a Made in Ontario paid sick day program to ensure that those folks who don't have paid sick days don't have to go to work sick. We're particularly conscious that these outbreaks are happening in, advanced manufacturing and food processing. So we're going to be looking for improved inspections.
Okay, if I could just jump right in there.
Yeah.
Because this has been a big talking point for your party since the resumption of the legislative session and even before that, paid sick days. And the government says there's already a program for paid sick days.
Well,
your party says that's inadequate. Why?
Well, the government says that everything's on the table and that they listen to, the medical officers of health, all of who have recommended, a strategic paid sick day program to keep healthy people at the workplace, but also unhealthy people from going to those workplaces. So, the federal program is insufficient. It's not enough money. We're talking about folks who live paycheck to paycheck and can't wait necessarily for days for that money to come into their bank accounts. It's administratively a heavy process, and when you have employers in the province of Ontario who have actually said, listen, provide some support for us so that when employees don't feel well, they don't have to go to work. This is how you control the virus, and the Financial Accountability Officer, Rob, has said in the province that the virus is driving the economy. So let's make sure that we have all of the tools at our disposal as a province to make sure that we can contain COVID-19 from being further transmitted. This also, the supports that we're going to be looking forward on a go-forward basis also include, of course, immediate action to start fixing the damage in our long-term care homes and hospitals.
All right.
Because there's a huge backlog in the province of Ontario.
Yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit more. On long-term care, it's long been the NDP policy. I mean, going back to the days of, I can remember this being a priority for Howard Hampton when he was the leader of the New Democrats. So, for example, 4 hours of care is a standard every day, but maybe you can expand on what you think should be done with long-term care in Ontario in this budget.
Yeah, we've very much connected over the years. You know, the lack of investment in long-term care has really, primarily privatized it. So for-profit long-term care in Ontario is alive and well, except that, what the pandemic has taught us, Rob, is that, deaths happened in long-term care, for-profit long-term care, 3 times more than they did in not-for-profit. So our plan going forward is to invest heavily, obviously, in building a not-for-profit extension of the healthcare system into long-term care. And we have been fighting for those minimum hours of care per resident, which is 4 hours. The government of the day, Doug Ford, has said they'll get to that in 2025. We can't afford to wait that long. All of us should be greatly ashamed of what has happened in our long-term care homes. Certainly, there's been a lack of comprehensive inspections and enforcement in some of those homes, and there's never been a strategy to actually support the care of seniors and residents in long-term care through investing in personal support workers. So, if this finance minister truly, cares about the well-being of seniors, there will be a comprehensive strategy which is funded much in the way that Quebec did over the summer. I mean, we're very delayed here in Ontario, but Quebec was very strategic. They said, listen, we need a recruitment drive to ensure that PSWs don't go from home to home to make ends meet at the end of the day. Let's pay them a fair wage. Let's train them up. Let's support them through the education system. These are logical solutions that this finance minister could bring to the budget process this year, and they would have our support.
Right. The Ford government would say, look, we're spending tens of millions of dollars right now.
Yeah.
Trying to hire as many personal support workers as we can. I know here in Ottawa, for example, at Algonquin College, people can sign up and take training for free to become a personal support
Well, look
worker.
how long it took them to do that. We knew that there was a crisis, a staffing crisis in long-term care way back in April. And just on the money piece, it's really interesting because to date, 94% of the pandemic funding that Doug Ford claims to have spent in Ontario, 94% of that money has been federal funding. So it's time for this premier to step up. It's time for him to say, okay, we know where the gaps in care are. We know that there's a huge connection now between the health and well-being of Ontarians. Mm-hmm. Let's make sure that we keep people healthy so that we can keep the economy open.
Okay. So that's the long-term care side. What about the hospital side?
Yeah, the hospital is very interesting because obviously, hospitals have been dealing with a huge crisis, but now it's the time for us to plan to address the backlog in surgeries. And, other provinces have done this, and so you don't need to reinvent the wheel here. BC had a very successful and aggressive plan. They opened up their operating rooms, one more for additional time. They were very strategic in how they addressed the crisis in the backlog of surgeries. We have 150,000 surgery backlog right now in Ontario. This is the time to invest in making sure that Ontarians get the health care that they need so that their health doesn't suffer any longer. Yeah. And the estimated backlog clearance time is 84 weeks. So let's fund the hospitals. Let's make sure that they can do their job, and let's make sure that people get the surgery that they need.
84 weeks.
84 weeks, yeah.
Wow.
This item would be approximately $725 million. That's what BC spent to address their backlog.
Right.
The province has the money. They need to spend it on the people that we serve.
Okay. So I think we've covered off healthcare here.
Yeah.
So let's go to another big line item. It's healthcare and it's education. Those are the the two big ones for any provincial government when it comes to budget planning.
Absolutely.
What about the education sector? Right?
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you live right now in the province, you feel very differently about the health and well-being of students and staff in schools.
Right.
There are strategic places where there have been outbreaks. In particular, our members here at Queen's Park have been talking about Peel, for instance. We see, the backlog in our schools was a hangover from the Liberals for many years, for 15 years, but the time to invest in better air filtration and cooling systems in our schools, this is a win-win in that it addresses a backlog around infrastructure in our schools, it does create jobs, and it creates healthier learning and working environments. So we have been pushing that for quite some time. Unfortunately, to date, the government has not been too responsive. But also on the education front, they received an early notice, Rob, that they're going to be losing $1.6 billion in, to address the pandemic and to address the new learning situation here in Ontario. We've maintained...
Yeah, but if I could just jump in there, that was one-time funding.
It was
the one time is over,
yeah.
Right?
But the issues that...
That's the whole idea, Catherine Fife, behind one-time funding is that it only happens one time.
I know, but there was already a backlog in education funding going into the pandemic, Rob. So the $1.6 billion, which was used to, hire some additional staff, train some folks up on new learning techniques, the issues of learning being interrupted and disrupted during this pandemic is going to require some attention. In fact, our education critic introduced a motion. The government did not support it, but it was to create a child and youth post-pandemic recovery strategy. So let's do some evaluation where, from a mental health perspective, from a learning benchmarks. You just can't pull that money out of the system and say, okay, back to normal. That's how this government has operated. They have reacted slowly and then inappropriately in many instances.
Okay, I have to ask you this. The Sunshine List was recently released for Ontario, as it is every year. Here's who makes more than $100,000 a year. And it's almost 1 in 4 teachers make $100,000 a year, Catherine Fife. 1 in 4 teachers, Ontario teachers, are making $100,000 a year. How sustainable is that, in the NDP's opinion?
Well, I think that, you will know this, Rob, from our history as a party, is that we do think that investing in people who are doing those core services, be they doctors, nurses, or teachers, or frontline, healthcare personnel, that, investing in those people is a good way to retain those people and to demonstrate that, their work is valued.
Right.
The Sunshine List has been contentious now for many years. Some people have said to me, well, is $100,000 what it used to be worth, 10 years ago? I still think $100,000 is a lot of money.
Sure.
We've been, as MPPs here, our salary's been frozen now for 12 years at $116,000.
Okay.
And I still think that that's a good salary to be able to serve the people of the province. So, the politics of the Sunshine List has,
I guess it's not so much the Sunshine List. It's 1 in 4 teachers are making $100,000 a year. Are teachers overpaid?
No, I don't think that teachers are overpaid.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I really don't.
Hard to get a New Democrat to say that anyway. But,
listen, they're teachers in the province of important work. And, you're going to find a whole spectrum of people to determine what those folks actually deserve. This government has not been very friendly to the teachers in that, they've called them union bosses, and there's lots of political...
Well, I don't know. This has been the government for 2 years. And the number of teachers on the Sunshine List doubled. I would say they've been pretty good to the teachers.
Well, those contracts were, those contracts were in place. Yeah. And, the government does have a responsibility to negotiate fair and openly for those contracts. So, there's lots of people on that list that, you can critique, but teachers for me are not one of them.
All right. Okay.
All right.
The 2020 budget projected a $38.5 billion budget deficit for the province of Ontario. How worried are New Democrats about the size of the deficit?
Well,
would you like to see it narrowed?
I have to say, Rob, right now I'm more worried about a third wave shutting down the economy. Okay. From a priorities perspective, the small businesses that I've been working with in Waterloo and many in Ottawa, I might add, they've said, listen, make sure that the investments are happening so that we don't have further outbreaks, so that people can access their vaccines, and so that we don't have to go down to a full shutdown. As you know, the numbers in Ontario are going in the wrong direction right now. So this budget, I've described it as one of the most important budgets in the history of this province. Because if we have to shut down again because of poor planning and because of under-resourcing healthcare and frontline essential workers, then those businesses are not going to make it. I mean, we've already seen 10,000 restaurants closed. So let's make sure that this budget, right now is focused on this year, on 2021, on ensuring that we address the gaps that exist in the system, be in the long-term care or hospital or the economy, so that we don't end up, with a further deficit of $38.5 billion.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine Fife. Good to hear from you this morning.
Always a pleasure, Rob.
Yep.
You take care of yourself.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The finance critic for Ontario's New Democrats, the official opposition at Queen's Park, back in session. We'll probably bring you some of the question period this morning. That's the MPP for Waterloo, Catherine Fife. Dr. Isaac Bogoch, member of Ontario's Vaccine Task Force, will join us next here on City News.
When it came to opening the business, because I was so young, there was a lot that I didn't know about management, financial management, management of people, all around management, I think is the word that I always come back to. I think that I always had a passion and I knew that I wanted to create a space for people to get their hair done, but I had no idea, even having studied business management, what it really took to open a business as well as sustain a successful business. So in 2014, I was actually working with Angela Sutcliffe. She was my business coach at the time, and she was like, what's your niche? Like, what separates you from other salons? And when we started to really dig, it was the curls. It was the fact that we work with all curl types, curly, kinky, wavy, coily, which is how we identify our curl types. And then you have straight hair as well, of course. But more than 70% of the world has some sort of pattern to their hair, and we just realized that was not being addressed. It wasn't something we learned about in school. So I went to the States and I traveled all over to kind of gain the information that I have now to be able to share it with our clients and as well as with other stylists. So in March when it came, I thought it was going to last, a week, 2 weeks. I think it started off at 2 weeks, and I was like, cool, I have 2 weeks to just relax, that's fine. So I was actually in a position where I was not happy, so to say, but I was a little bit happy, to be honest, just because of what I was experiencing personally. Now, when that extension started to happen, it was not a great feeling. It was very uncomfortable not knowing how I was going to support myself financially. So I'm so excited about the Academy. It's something that I started and I launched it during the pandemic. So I've been teaching for a number of years. I've been educating for a number of years. I educated at Algonquin. I've educated at Versailles Hair Academy. And I've also educated in my own space, in this space and my old space up on Greenbank. And so it was just a continuum of what, I've been doing for these years. When we have a client in our chair, it's not just about making your hair look great. It's about how do you go home and take what we've just taught you and emulate that. So now with a world where people want to quote unquote be diverse and inclusive, what does that really look like in a salon setting? And for me, it looks like being able to invite any curl type, any hair type really, because I can take care of straight hair types just as well as, I can take care of curls. And we cater to all curl types regardless of what you look like on the outside, we got you.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News,
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
We're welcoming back this morning Dr. Isaac Bogoch, infectious disease physician, member of Ontario's Vaccine Task Force. Morning again, doctor.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, hanging in.
I'm enjoying the weather. I don't know what the weather is like where you are. You're in Toronto, right? So you're having the nice mild
great,
weather.
Actually.
Yeah. Good for the mental health, right, Doctor?
Oh my God, we all need it, eh?
Yeah,
Just
it's
get
amazing.
outside, get some rays on the face, have a life.
So the case counts still stubbornly high for the province of Ontario, although the number of fatal cases of COVID-19 appears to be declining. How would you characterize right now the situation with COVID-19 cases in Ontario?
I'd say it's a little precarious. I mean, you can't ignore that they've gone up pretty significantly in the last month. I don't like the day-to-day. I still look at it, but I really think the 7-day average is the best metric. If we look at the 7-day average from the beginning of the month, it was about 1,000. If we look at the 7-day average now, it's north of 1,400, closer to 1,500 cases per day. That's not good. That's clearly not good. And the other issue, too, is there's a lot more to this than just the cases, right? You got to look at hospital capacity and ICU capacity. And, like, our ICUs just aren't as decompressed from the second wave as we would have liked. So we just don't have a ton of wiggle room in the ICUs compared to earlier on. So if you see a rapid spike in cases and people are going to need hospitalizations and ICU care, we just don't have the same capacity that we would like to care for the population of Ontario.
Okay, how do you explain, or what do you think is behind the rising case counts?
Well, I mean, it's pretty safe to say that the province is in various stages of reopening. We know there's no secrets, right? We know where this virus is transmitted. It's been over a year. You know, if you put people indoors and you put more of them indoors and then occasionally you take their masks off, you're going to get transmission. It's as simple as that. It could be a school. It could be a place of worship. It could be a restaurant. It could be a business. It doesn't matter where it is. Indoors is indoors is indoors. This virus is almost exclusively, I'm careful with my words, almost exclusively transmitted in indoor settings.
Okay.
And the more we get people indoors, the more transmission we're going to see. Easy peasy.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not like it's wide open. I mean, this isn't, you see what's going on in Miami, right? It's like crazy bedlam. That's not Ontario. Peel and Toronto are still in the gray zone in Peel and Toronto, Doctor. Right?
Yeah,
it's still pretty locked down, right? So
I don't know if Miami's the best place to compare us to. I would probably aim for something a little more reasonable. Okay. But on the other hand, listen, all I'm saying is there's just no surprise, right? Like, we haven't vaccinated a significant proportion of our population. So most of us are still susceptible because most of us are not immune either from natural infection and recovery or from vaccination. And, you know, you've got opportunities to put more and more people indoors. All I'm saying is you can't be surprised if you see more cases. You can't. Like, it should really come to no one's. You don't need a crystal ball for this one.
Right. Okay.
That's pretty obvious. So I guess the other question is, okay, you know, in the immortal words of your favorite 90s hip-hop artist, Ludacris, what you gonna do, right? And the answer is move people outdoors, right?
Right.
Support outdoor businesses, outdoor restaurants, outdoor dining, outdoor everything. The weather's getting better. We can do it. Do it. I mean, and yeah, you know, you might have to temporarily bend some local legislation and be creative, but like, this isn't for forever. It's just for a few months. That's all. It's just for a few months until we catch up with the vaccinations. But, you know, outdoor environments are so much safer. It's not 100% safe, but it's so much safer than indoors. I just move everything outdoors. And I think, you know, people get all uppity about, oh, you took over the sidewalk or you took over the street or you took over this green space. Whatever. Sure.
Right.
It's not for forever. It's for like a few months.
Move outside, let's do it. That's Tone Loc, by the way, which would be an 80s hip hop reference. So, well, we're sticking with this theme, but nevertheless, is this confirmation though? These stubbornly high case counts, 1,780 something yesterday, for example, and a new number due in about 15 minutes from now, that these variants of concern are indeed more contagious.
Yeah, I mean, we know that. The variants are more, they just cause bigger outbreaks. It's harder to keep them under control, but it certainly can be kept under control. I think sometimes the narrative is that these are these big, scary monsters, and obviously, they cause bigger outbreaks. And on top of that, it looks like they can cause more symptomatic infection and people just get a bit sicker from them. Okay. It's still, masking, distancing, ventilation, hand hygiene, outdoors, it all works. It'll still work the same. We've watched other countries get this under control. We can get it under control as well. I think the other important thing is variant or not, if you cram people indoors, you're going to see cases. So Thunder Bay in that area is having a big spike in cases. And most of those aren't the variant of concern. Most of them aren't, right? Whereas in PL and Toronto, we've got about, 40 to 50% variant of concern here. You got to respect the variant of concern, but you still, in the same breath, COVID-19 is still COVID-19. If you let your guard down, it'll cause an explosive outbreak. It's so, I don't want to oversimplify things, but I really think that to some extent you kind of can. Move people outdoors, keep people outdoors. It's just way safer.
Okay. Walk us through what the clinical trials, these phase 3 clinical trials, say about the efficacy of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine.
Well, this was exciting. I mean, it was released just this morning. Just to rewind and remind people, it was several months ago, AstraZeneca released some other clinical trial results, and calling it how it is, it was a bit of sloppy science, right? They messed up the dosing. They had different dosing in different countries. They had slightly different protocols in different countries, and they really just cobbled together a few different trials and pretended it was one trial. And the results were unclear. And essentially, they basically redid an entire clinical trial. Most of it was conducted in the United States. There was a few sites in Chile and Peru. They enrolled over 32,000 people. And we got a press release, so of course we can't confidently look anyone in the eye and tell them with a straight face exactly what the data shows. But based on some of the press release information, it had a 79% efficacy. If you look at people over the age of 65, that was held to about 80% efficacy in people over the age of 65. They didn't really see any signals for adverse outcomes in the vaccine compared to the placebo group, so that's really good. I think obviously we have to keep in mind people have been talking about blood clots, and rightfully so. This trial would not be powered to see blood clots, right? The blood clots that we've heard of are very, very, very rare events, and you wouldn't see that in a group of 32,000 people. So they didn't show any signal, but it's not surprising. In all fairness, I think if we take a step back and take it at face value, fantastic. Great. We've got this vaccine. We've got more of this vaccine coming in. It's in pharmacies. If you're in Ontario, 60 years of age and up, you can get this vaccine. I mean, I hope people are rushing to the pharmacy to get this.
Okay. Dr. Isaac Bogoch, always a pleasure to have you on our show, sir. I thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Yep, you too. He's a member of Ontario's Vaccine Task Force in Toronto today, Dr. Isaac Bogoch. We'll do the 10 o'clock news coming up next, and then it's our talkback hour, your hour of opinions and phone calls at 750-1310, right after the news here on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, March 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 4 degrees. It's 8 degrees in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. At least 2 areas, Eastern Ontario, back in the red zone, including Smiths Falls and Ottawa. Provincial case counts of COVID are on the rise again. While we are getting more vaccine doses arriving, more on that in a moment, one member of the Provincial Vaccine Task Force says our numbers are precarious. Dr. Isaac Bogoch tells the Rob Snow Show indicators simply are not good right now.
We just don't have a ton of wiggle room in the ICUs compared to earlier on. So if you see a rapid spike in cases and people are going to need hospitalizations and ICU care, we just don't have the same capacity that we would like.
Now, he says as the province approaches a 7-day average of some 1,500 new cases of COVID a day, it is not good. As the age for those wanting to register for a vaccine lowers to 75 across Ontario, hundreds of thousands more doses of vaccine are set to arrive in our country in the next week. There's also some new research out which should reassure those getting the AstraZeneca shot in particular. Here's City News reporter Jamie Pulfer.
It's starting today a huge increase in this country's vaccine shipment.
Canada will receive at least 1 million Pfizer doses per week from March 22nd to May 10th.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau with the big ramp up. We're also expecting more than 845,000 doses from Moderna this week and as many as 1.5 million doses of AstraZeneca from the U.S. This as we get new clinical trial data from the U.S. on the AstraZeneca vaccine, saying that it's 79% effective in preventing COVID-19 symptoms and 100% effective in preventing severe illness, considerably higher than the trials out of Britain last year, showing 62% efficacy. An independent committee also found no increased risk of blood clots among the more than 20,000 participants receiving at least 1 dose of the vaccine. I'm Jamie Pulfer.
City News time, 10:03. And now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Temperatures well above average again today. Lots of sunshine, very mild. The high near 17 degrees. The average high is about 4 or 5 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear, -1. And tomorrow, sun and clouds, 17. That's the high today, 17.
And right now in Ottawa, 4 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 8. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has responded after derogatory and homophobic graffiti was painted outside Mayor Jim Watson's home yesterday. In a tweet, Trudeau says he was appalled by that news and that there is no place for this ignorant and inexcusable hate in our city or anywhere in the country. He adds Canadians across Canada are standing with Jim Watson in support. 26 countries sent representatives to stand outside the Chinese court where Michael Kovrig was put on trial today. They were all barred from entering the courthouse. William Klein is the acting deputy chief of mission at the American Embassy in Beijing.
The United States stands shoulder to shoulder with Canada in calling for the immediate release of their 2 citizens from arbitrary detention.
Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor were detained in 2018, just days after Canada's arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States. Just getting the new numbers in for COVID cases in the province today. 1,699 new cases in Ontario. Of that number, 85 of them are in Ottawa. We'll have full numbers for the region coming up at 10:30. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Talk back hour. Your hour. You don't call, I'll make it my hour. Lots of things I want to talk about today. I haven't been here in a few days. Latest case counts are in for the province of Ontario. It's just shy of 1,700 cases reported for today. 1,699. 1,699. 85 in Ottawa, which is about the same as it was yesterday, I believe. 12 in Leeds, Grenville, 4 in Renfrew, and in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, 39 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. So a few things that's just breaking right now. Thank you, David, for passing that along. Conservative Party policy convention held virtually. And a lot of the media coverage has to do with one particular vote on climate change. There was a motion put to the delegates, basically said the Conservative Party of Canada thinks climate change is real, and the Conservative Party of Canada will do something about it. So I want to ask you, I'm going to give you some quotes from some of the columnists who can't make heads or tails of what the Conservatives are doing. How important is it for you, my friends on the right side of things, that the Conservative Party have a serious platform to explain to Canadians its plan to fight climate change? Okay. Is it very important? Yes, very important. I will not vote for the Conservatives unless they have a serious platform explaining to Canadians their plan to fight climate change. Is it, say, somewhat important? Yeah, but it's an important issue, but it's not the biggest one for me. Or is it, not important at all? Not worried about it at all. I'd love to get into that with you. A lot of ink spilled over that in the last day or so. In addition to that, the latest Sunshine List is out. This is a Mike Harris era policy. We're going to release the salary disclosure for every member of the broader public service in the province of Ontario earning at least $100,000. Okay? And the latest one came out, and the number of Ontario teachers making at least $100,000 a year doubled in a year because of the salary grid that teachers work under and because of, the collective bargaining agreement, okay? But it's almost 1 in 4 Ontario teachers now. 23% of Ontario teachers earn at least $100,000 a year. At least $100,000 a year. Now, remember, this doesn't say how many are making $99,000 and $98,000. Okay. So I have a question for you. Are Ontario teachers overpaid? Okay, we have, look where we are, okay? We have a province, it's budget week in the province of Ontario. $38 billion in debt, okay? Education is the second largest line item for the government, behind only health care. And 1 in 4 teachers is making $100,000 a year. 1 in 4. Okay, well, I'm not quite, almost 1 in 4. It's 30,000 teachers are making $100,000 a year. Are there? I mean, here's a simple question for you. Are there too many teachers making too much money? What do you think? 750-1310, 750-1310, 750-1310. Again, some people are, there's Rob Snow again, picking on the teachers. He's been picking on the teachers for as long as I've been listening to that guy. He picks on teachers and he picks on bus drivers. Yeah, we should look that up. How many bus drivers made the list? If you happen to be a supporter of the Conservative Party, if you're someone who's on the more right side of things, if you're someone who's even tempted to give the Conservatives a look, I want to know how important it is that your party have a serious platform to fight climate change. So very important, not important at all. Would you consider it to be a top priority for you? Is it a must-have? I'd really like to know your thinking on this one. Here we are on a Monday morning. Conservative Party policy convention has come and gone, and the party is this morning being portrayed as the party of dinosaurs, as the party filled with climate change deniers. And while it might be all well and good for Aaron O'Toole to say that he thinks the party needs to change and the Conservative Party needs to evolve, and Aaron O'Toole might say he thinks the debate about climate change is over, the grassroots of the party, the people who sign up to become members of the party, the people who go through the motions to actually become delegates to attend conventions like the one recently held, the people who volunteer for the party, the people who donate money to the party, some of those people, they don't see it that way when it comes to climate change. And I don't know about you, but when it comes to climate change, fighting climate change, how important is it for you that the Conservative Party take that issue seriously? 750-1310, 750-1310. Email therobsnowshow@ottawa.citynews.ca. I mean, the party brass avoided the revenge, I guess you could say, of the pro-life wing of the party, the more religious wing of the party, the SOCONs. No votes on abortion came up during the policy convention. So the Conservatives kind of dodged a bullet, is one way to look at it. And, here's the silver medal for Justin Trudeau, climate change. And the headlines, they're everywhere to prove it. And there's no doubt the Liberals and Team Trudeau are already hard at work plotting how to best use what happened at this policy convention to maximum effect. They want to use this to maximum effect during an election campaign. There was a motion calling on the Conservative Party to officially recognize, quote, climate change is real. And they defeated it. Okay. Climate change is real, and the Conservative Party will do something about it. And it went down to defeat. They had a vote. The delegates had a chance to say, climate change is real. It's happening. The planet is warming. Humans are causing it. But it failed. And now a lot of people think that's some dandy ammunition for the Liberals to use right there. And make no mistake, they're going to use it. Basically going to say, look at those backward, redneck conservatives. Their pickup trucks and their guns. They're so far gone, they're so out to lunch, they're so stuck in a bygone area, they don't even think that climate change is real, let alone that something needs to be done about it, okay? So if you care about climate change, if you care about the country, if you care about the planet, if you care about the future of humanity, if you care about Greta, if you care about your children and your grandchildren, what planet they're going to inherit and inhabit, how can you possibly consider voting for the Conservative Party after what they did this weekend? Those Canadian Conservatives don't even think climate change is real. You can't vote for them. We did not make this up. Choose your Canada, right? There's ample evidence of that in the media this morning, ladies and gentlemen. How important is it that the Conservatives have a serious platform explaining to Canadians the Conservative plan to fight climate change? Is it very important? A must-have? A must-have? Like, type it with me. A must-have? Important but not the biggest issue? Or is it not important at all? I wouldn't spend 5 minutes on it. What do you think? Okay, let's get into it here. Brendan in Blackburn Hamlet. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Rob. I love your show.
Well, I thank you for calling.
I wish I was as eloquent as you are.
God bless you, sir. Thank you.
I want to tell you that the Conservative vote against the environmental process is so out of line with the world. However, I just wanted to say they're in total denial.
Okay.
It's like these people that wear no masks. They just are in total denial. However, on the environment, I don't know if you know this company called Kital. It's, I think, in the Toronto area somewhere, where they have a process of adding water to diesel fuel.
Okay.
And this
to what end? To what end? To reduce emissions, or
yes, reduce emissions.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know anything about it, but
oh my gosh, I watched their process and on TV, and it is quite formidable.
Oh. Okay.
The other thing I wanted to.
But let me ask you this: to my question today.
Yes.
How important is it for you that the Conservatives have a serious plan to fight climate change?
Well, I unfortunately, Aaron O'Toole is not a very powerful. He's eloquent and he's a good man and has a great family life.
Right.
But my goodness, he just doesn't have the pizzazz to cross that.
Right. So what I'm getting from you is you don't think he's going to win anyway, whether he has a climate change plan or not.
Oh no, I do not think that he will. I used to be a formidable liberal type.
Right.
But I converted to the NDP because of their giving ways.
Converted to the NDP. Okay. All right. Look, Brendan, thank you for calling, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Do you want to take one more? No, we better stop. I'm getting the evil eye here. 2 Davids and a Ron. Be right back. Talking what happened with the vote at the Conservative convention. Climate change is real. Defeated at the Conservative Policy Convention. What do you think about that? And how about this? 1 in 4 teachers in Ontario make $100,000 a year. Do we have too many teachers in Ontario making too much money? Rob Snow Show, Talkback Hour, City News.
It started out with a small outdoor booth in what was called Sali, which is actually the area just outside our store on William Street. Where for a couple of years we sold our jewelry directly on the street, and then we slowly evolved to having an indoor location in this building, 55 Barwood Market Square. We then moved to another location in Place de Ville, and then moved back down here on Dalhousie Street at Irrigere in the 90s, and then back into this building again in 2000 as a collection. I do a collection of jewelry called C-ritic. That's mainly beaded work with a combination of semi-precious and vintage beads. And then she does a hat collection called Fanfreluche that's all cut and sewn hats in a variety of fabrics and for all of the seasons of the year. We've curated and sourced the artisans that we represent in a lot of different ways over the years since it's been, since 1985. Some people come to us since we're known, and other artisans that we represent might recommend that they come and see us. Some people we find at craft shows, or we see their work, somebody wears it in, and we go and track it down and bring it. And then some people, interestingly, are with us in one medium, and then sometimes they evolve to another. They're all Canadian and mainly local. With the roughly 50 people that we have, I'd say more than half of those are Ottawa-Gatineau, and then the rest are from other cities in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. If you can afford it, go to a small business and spend some money. It's lovely when you come in and, give me a pep talk and tell me how much you love this place and you've been coming here for years. But if you can afford it, please spend some money too, because all the pep talks in the world are not going to pay my rent, which is still full rent even when we're closed. Then secondly, if you can't afford to spend money, follow the businesses that you want to support on social media. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, follow their Twitter, and then retweet, share their Facebook page, like and comment. Because if you can't afford to, as many of us can't right now, to do extra expenditures, doing all of those little things like that will raise the visibility of those small businesses, and hopefully for them result in some online or curbside or other business for them.
Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
How important is it for you, the Conservative Party, as a serious platform for explaining to Canadians its plan to fight climate change? We're the government. This is what we're going to do to fight climate change. Is that very important? Is it a must-have? Is it somewhat important? Not the biggest issue, or is it not important at all? Don't waste any time on on the fight against climate change. Where do you stand on some of these issues this morning? David in Ottawa West. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, sir.
Rob.
Yes.
Until they clean up the planet, I won't believe in climate change. Okay.
All right.
Have you watched some of the documentaries as to what's going on? They're catching whales with 100 pounds of plastic inside their body.
Right.
So,
okay.
The climate change is a dodge. So they don't have to address the real problems of the world.
I see.
And climate change is...
You think the whole idea of the environmental movement has become all consumed with emissions and temperature and the warming of the planet and less about dirty water and dirty air, right?
Exactly. The planet will do what it wants to do no matter what climate change we enter into.
Okay,
but that's not why I called.
This sounds kind of like the budget will balance itself to me, David.
No, it doesn't. No, the balance will not balance itself.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Rob, I have an appointment for my needle on Thursday.
Oh, good.
Now,
where do you go for that?
At the Sportsplex.
Oh, at the Sportsplex. Okay.
And I also have my second appointment.
Oh, good.
But as you know, the wife got her needle a couple of Fridays ago.
Yes.
But she doesn't have her second appointment yet.
Oh, okay.
They said they were going to phone, and they haven't phoned
Well, I
yet.
would be following up on that.
I'm trying to trace it down.
Yeah.
One last thing.
Yes, okay. All right.
Remember the problem we had on the Quebec border with people coming across a year or so ago? The Americans are preparing people to flood Canada.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, all those people coming in to the United States, they're sending a lot of them to the eastern provinces so that they can come to Canada.
Oh, really?
And they're working on it, apparently. I have a buddy in the States that told me that last night.
Well, if your buddy in the United States said it, it must be true, David.
Well, I don't know, except for this, that the people that are coming across...
Yeah, we're way off the topic, man. Way off the topic, David. We're not even in the same country. You're so off the topic, for crying out loud. You're 2 countries away. To the south end, David.
Good morning, Rob.
David's on sale. I got 3 Daves on the line.
Welcome back.
Yes,
these are the Daves I know, yeah. Hello, is Dave there? No, Dave, never mind.
That's
anyway,
right.
let's get to the topics.
Yeah.
I was going to make 2 comments, and most major one on the climate change thing.
Yeah.
I do believe in climate change.
Okay.
I don't believe it's as 100% man-made. There's other things too, climate shifts naturally. You have to deal with it. What I don't agree with is some of the mitigation processes that are being used. And let me give you an example of electric cars. They want everybody to be electric by 2035.
Yeah.
It's impossible to have that many electric cars. First, we can't build that many batteries. The amount of rare earth minerals and even silver and other things that go into making those batteries, there's not enough of that stuff in the earth to make all those batteries.
Well, we have quite a deposit of that stuff right here in Canada if they would let us mine for it. We'd have towns that are named cobalt for crying out loud.
Exactly. But I don't know if we have enough to get access to do things that quickly.
Yeah.
And are we going to be sending space probes out and mining asteroids and bringing it back?
Yeah. Well, so far I have interviewed experts and interviewed business people who are in the business of trying to get us into rare earth mineral refining, and that's the big...
It's expensive.
It's one thing to dig it out of the ground.
Yeah, it's expensive, it's dirty, and it's all kinds of other things, and it's not going to do us any favors
right.
in terms of the environment.
Yeah.
So that's the thing there. The teachers.
Yeah. 1 in 4 making $100,000 a year now.
They're quite well paid, and I challenge them. The next time that a contract comes up, don't ask for more money. They keep telling us it's all about the kids, but they take more money. So I challenge them. Next time the contract comes up, don't take any more money.
Okay.
Just get programming for the kids. Take your 2% raise and put in a 2% increase for stuff for the kids. And let them put their money where their mouth is. Then we'll know who's telling the truth.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Hot as usual. Okay. John Ibbotson, Globe and Mail this morning on this conservative vote on climate change. Okay. Climate change is real and the Conservatives will do something about it. Voted down at the policy convention. Okay. Quote, in the Globe and Mail opinion section, columnist John Ibbotson, quote, the Conservatives need to release a credible climate change policy well before the next election, ignoring any objections from the base. The base, that's you, ladies and gentlemen. You are the base. Well, some of you are. Some of you are. Okay. Otherwise, this is Ibbotson, otherwise, suburban Ontario is lost to them. Suburban Ontario, like Nepean, like Canada, like Orleans. Nepean, Canada, Orleans, a lot of Liberals there. A lot of Liberal MPs there. Suburban Ontario is lost to them. Narrow path, treacherous path. That's in the Globe and Mail this morning. Okay. Then you have Aaron Wherry over at CBC News. Item headlined, O'Toole's pitch to get Conservatives to embrace change off to a rocky start. Shaky start, it says. Off to a shaky start. Quote, delegates delivered a potentially damaging vote on climate change policy that suggests his party base might not be ready to move very far. O'Toole, quote, doubled down on his criticism of the current federal carbon price and fell back on a framing that casts the environment as a discrete issue as opposed to a broader view that sees climate policy intertwined with almost all other areas of public policy. Well, you see, that's kind of the problem that a lot of people have with it, is that it becomes intertwined with all other areas of public policy. The headlines generated by that vote might be a serious setback to O'Toole's goal of rebranding his party, end quote. See, well, we're already getting those headlines. You're writing those headlines, right? In abundance. In abundance. Oh, headlines. We've got headlines. Canadian Press, Tory grassroots vote against putting lines saying climate change policy is real. Efforts to enshrine the reality of climate change. The reality of climate change. An official Conservative Party policy failed this weekend, marking a blow to Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole's efforts to position his party as serious on environmental issues. Headline, Toronto Star, Susan Delacourt. Climate change denial. Proof Aaron O'Toole's Conservatives are living in their own virtual reality. This one development, she writes, almost guarantees Justin Trudeau and his Liberals will be doing everything they can to put climate change at the center of the next election campaign, whenever that happens. Same newspaper, Toronto Star. On climate, Aaron O'Toole hasn't learned from his predecessor's mistakes. Headlines. Read all about it, how the Conservatives are a party of climate change deniers. Halftime on the Talkback Hour. Your calls right after the news on City News.
a.m.
It's Monday, March 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, it's 8 degrees, 11 in Smiths Falls, and here's what's making news this hour. Latest COVID-19 case numbers across Ontario show 1,699 more cases today than yesterday. 85 of those new cases are in Ottawa, 12 of them in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 39 in Eastern Ontario, 4 new cases in Renfrew. 500 of these new cases today are in Toronto. The province also reporting 3 more deaths from COVID-19. Infectious disease expert Dr. Isaac Bogoch is concerned about the case numbers in our province, telling City News this morning, you have to take the rolling 7-day average, which is approaching 1,700 new cases a day. He says that amount of infection can put a tremendous strain on hospitals, especially the intensive care units. The Prime Minister, among many who have condemned the graffiti spray painted on the road in front of Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson's house. Justin Trudeau tweeting his support for the mayor, saying he's appalled at the inexcusable and ignorant hate which has no place in the city or in the country. Diplomats were barred from attending Canadian Michael Kovridge's trial in Beijing, China today. The former diplomat's trial on spying charges follows Friday's trial for fellow Canadian Michael Spavor. Jim Nichol, the Canadian Embassy's deputy chief of mission, was in a crowd of diplomats from other countries waiting for word that never came. City News Time at 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
2 big issues we're talking about. Conservative Party Policy Convention just wrapped up, the virtual type. Climate change is real and the Conservatives will fight climate change. That was one of the motions. Defeated. Climate change is real. Went down to defeat at the Conservative Party Policy Convention. Tailor-made Liberal attack ad right there. Asking when it comes to the issue of climate change, how important is it for you that this party, this so-called government in waiting, that how important is it that it have a serious policy platform on climate change, on fighting climate change? Is it very important? You don't want to fight the next election without it? Is it, okay, it's kind of important, but it's not, it's not in the meat and potatoes issue for you, or not important at all, wouldn't waste any time on it. That's one. And the number of Ontario teachers making at least $100,000 a year doubled in the last year. According to the Sunshine List, there are collective agreements and salary grids to explain that. It's 30,000 teachers or so. It's 1 in 4 teachers in Ontario. Almost 1 in 4, 23%, according to Post Media. Of Ontario teachers earn at least $100,000 a year. Are teachers overpaid in Ontario? When 1 in 4 are making $100,000 a year. What do you think? 750-1310, right back to it here. There's the other Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, if Trudeau's going to win the election on climate change, then this country is dumber than I thought. I mean, if that's going to win him the election, that is ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, there's way more pressing matters than worrying about climate change. I mean, climate's going to change no matter what. I remember back, I think it was in 1970, I remember Suzuki standing in the middle of some area where he said, in 10 years, this is going to be flooded out. The icebergs are going to melt, and we're going to be flooded out of here. And, of course, it never happened.
Right, okay.
I mean, I've lived through ozone layer problems and acid rain, and everything just changes all the time.
Right. So you wouldn't waste 5 minutes on it then, by the
time? No, I mean, I know there is climate change, but it's not... I mean, the climate's going to change no matter what. I mean, what are you going to... Well,
what the experts are saying now, Dave, is that the change that's happening now is not your grandfather's climate change. Okay.
I also heard
that the planet is warming, and it's warming faster than it's ever warmed before.
Well, I don't believe that.
You don't believe it? Okay.
No, I go to Hawaii. I've been going there for the past 20 years.
Right. Okay.
And I see all the markers, and the ocean has not changed levels whatsoever. Nothing has happened.
Nothing has happened.
No.
Okay. All right.
And
So
I
it's
just
not
have one more
important. It's not important, right? What I'm asking is, how important is it for the Conservative Party?
There's more pressing needs. In
More
this country.
pressing issues. Gotcha.
We can't. What are you going to keep paying carbon taxes or do what? What is it doing for us? Absolutely nothing. It's just more money out of our pocket, and enough is enough.
All right, enough is enough. All right, thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I want to take this call here. Ron Armprior. Ron.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning. Yep.
And I think all conservatives know that climate changes. I think also what most conservatives know is that it's not man-made.
Not man-made.
Just because the media has nothing but climate alarmists on as guests, and that's the only people they talk to, there's plenty out there that, including the IPCC, who are saying no, it's not actually doing it. The carbon's not doing anything. It's all political theater. It's nothing more.
All political theater. Okay.
We have bigger problems, i.e. dirty water, lack of husband forestry causing forest fires. This is the problems that O'Toole should be pushing. Clean up the country, clean up our rivers, clean up the land, fix our forests, get rid of the pine beetles, and all these things that are causing fires. It's pure nonsense.
Pure nonsense. Okay. So you wouldn't waste 5 minutes on it. You wouldn't put 5 minutes.
We've got huge problems in this country.
Sure. Yeah.
And climate's not one of them.
Climate's not.
You used to have Professor Robson on. I don't know why you don't anymore.
John Robson, you mean, from the National Post? Yeah, I haven't had him on lately.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I missed that. I'm sorry. I always enjoyed having him on.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks, Ron. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Just before we get back to the phones here, and just be patient. The legislature was off last week. It's back this week, and the Premier and Andrea Horwath are going at one another again right now in the Ontario legislature here.
Dramatically. Dr. Peter Juni said this.
Talking about
We're
the
heading
rising COVID
for another
cases.
lockdown. Now, these are what the experts are saying. These are quotes directly from the expert speaker. So my question to the Premier is, why does he continue to ignore these repeated pieces of advice from the experts and instead seem to be just walking us straight into another massive lockdown in our province?
Premier.
Again, through you, Mr. Speaker, we listen to the experts. We have the panel of docs that give us advice every single day, and we appreciate the great job Dr. Williams and his whole team has done, and the other experts. And, once they give us the green light, we go to thorough discussions on when we open up, how we open up, and they give us a direction, and we follow that direction. And that's exactly what we've done.
The next question, once again, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks so much, Speaker. My next question is also for the Premier. This is about warnings from the hospital sector. In fact, Anthony Dale, about a month ago, from the Ontario Hospital Association, said this, and I quote, "The warning to the Premier could not have been clearer. An exhausted, overextended hospital sector is likely going to have to deal with a third pandemic wave. Ultimately, the consequences of and responsibility for today's decision to reopen on February 16th rests with the Government of Ontario." Will the Premier admit that, in fact, he refused to listen to this warning from the Ontario Hospital Association and those frontline exhausted and overworked healthcare providers and are now putting at risk the capacity of these hospitals to keep people well in Ontario?
To reply.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. No. And in fact, I can advise the Leader of the Official Opposition that we have been building up hospital capacity since the beginning of this pandemic. We have built created over 3,100 more hospital beds across the province of Ontario, which is the equivalent of 6 medium-sized hospitals. We've also recently received approval to spend up to $125 million to create more intensive care beds and medicine beds.
Basically, the accusation on this Monday morning in the Ontario legislature for question period is, why did you ignore the advice of all of these experts? And now look at us, we have almost 1,700 cases of COVID-19. So that's the Ontario question period. Meantime, in federal politics, it's all about the Conservative Party being the party of the climate change deniers. National Post headline, O'Toole the debate over on climate change, but his party's grassroots disagree. CTV, Tory grassroots vote against putting line saying climate change is real into policy. The Guardian, for crying out loud, the Guardian out of the UK. Canadian Conservative Party votes not to recognize climate crisis as real. Now, at the Guardian newspaper, I don't know if you know this, David, say you're a reporter, they're all in on climate change. At the Guardian, I think it's a big beat for them.
Definitely.
Their editorial policy, they don't even call it climate change. You have to call it in your reporting climate crisis because they say climate change is too benign. It does not capture the enormity of the situation.
It's a crisis.
You must call it the climate crisis.
Call it what it is. Come on now.
Headlines, headlines, headlines. Read all about it. Aaron O'Toole declares climate change is real, but party grassroots say otherwise. Aaron O'Toole pitches new direction, but conservatives stick to old positions. Conservative delegates reject adding climate change is real to the policy book. Conservative party members vote down resolution to recognize the reality of climate change. You get the idea. Okay? And it's more about this idea that, like, conservatives, are they really ready to govern, or do they just want to pick on each other? You know, the leader of the party, this is kind of the narrative, the leader of the party is trying to drag the base, kicking and screaming to the center, and the base wants nothing to do with the center. And in so doing, they're dooming this party to opposition status for all eternity because Canadians are never, ever, ever again going to elect a party, never hand over the keys to the government to a party that fails to address the climate crisis. That's basically it in a nutshell. What do you think? Rick in Canada. Rick.
Yeah, Rob, I'm not a climate change denier. I do believe there's climate change.
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't think we're causing it. That's what you're going to say?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I do believe we're causing it.
Okay.
But the thing is I also agree with what Obama said, which was that we've got to start having a conversation about reality if our governments and democracies are going to work. And right now, we've increased the world population by 100%. We've gone from less than 4 billion to almost 8 billion in 50 years. And you can't expect to do that and not impact negatively the climate. There's no way.
Right.
So the Conservatives have to come up with a climate change plan, but they also have to say, look, this is what we also have to start doing about the world overpopulation crisis and bring that up at international forums as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Okay. Ann. Good morning, Ann. Hi, Ann.
I think you should have John Robson back on. I think what that guy actually said is not true. The population is not increasing, it's decreasing. That is a fact. Get it from another source. Okay, first of all, the teachers. It's not just that so many of them make so much money.
Right.
They get, let's not forget the perks. They get 3 months off a year, please. And governing is about priorities.
Great pension, right? Yeah.
You know, like, and I shouldn't throw stones at a glass house since I was in the federal government, but please, I did not get 3 months off a freaking year. It's not just that. Okay, this is, we have learned of all the problems in long-term care. That requires money.
Yep.
And because all the money has been given to groups like the teachers,
right.
I don't dispute nurses and doctors.
Well, there are more nurses on the Sunshine List this year, but a lot of them it's because of overtime. Now, are you begrudge a nurse working overtime over the last year? Right?
Absolutely not. And they're working in danger. And a lot of them did not have vaccinations, blah, 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 But so it's about priorities. And I think more priorities should be going to important things. There is just not an endless supply of money to spend on everything. And plus, they make so much money. If they get another 2% increase this year, my head's going to come off.
Okay.
Now, I've heard a lot of things about the climate change thing.
Yes.
I agree with...
Is it important important that the party have a serious climate change?
I think it's important that the Conservative Party run on what they're going to do differently. What we've lived the past year, that is a crisis. This other thing, to me, the climate has always changed, and I've heard a lot of experts talking about this too. Like, yeah, a certain amount of it is human caused. I don't think, like they say, 80% of it's human caused.
Right.
The thing is, when you start caring about the planet more than the actual people who have to live on the planet, like people who have no money and can't afford to pay extra costs for things when Trudeau keeps increasing the carbon tax, that is just heartless and insane. I think the environment, we need to get back to things like keeping the air clean, keeping the water clean. I mean, there's so many hypocrisies and inconsistencies.
Don't obsess over emissions, in other words.
How come it's okay to dump raw sewage into the St. Lawrence River, but I shouldn't drive my car to go to the store?
Gotta go, Ann. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Fired up today. Should the Conservatives have a serious climate change plan, or does that not matter to you? 750-1310, Rob Snow Show on.
I started, as I said, at Lester's Barber Shop, and it was kind of, it was one of those things that it was just an opportune time for me to get into it, just because he had decided that he was going to retire after the fire, and then the opportunity presented itself that I could open my own shop. And so I went from a 150 square foot space on St. Patrick's Street to a 600 square foot space just on Beechwood to now here, and I'm in a 1,400 square foot space now. And I don't know, it's been an interesting journey because, you know, you think that you're just going to be just you or a really small space, and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got 10 other people working for you, you're in a much bigger space, and even incorporating the boutique. Last March, when all of this started, I mean, we closed down a little bit earlier than everybody else, and I'm going to say, you know, being honest, part of it was social pressure. We shut down before everybody else did, and I'm watching all these other salons, you know, just be really responsible and saying we don't want to be a part of the process. So we got ahead of it and closed, and then, you know, the week later, the government's like, everybody's shutting down, and so it was a little nerve-wracking. I guess the first step of us, you know, trying to innovate and just keep moving forward was when the salon is closed, right? It's like, what do you do? Our whole industry is based on being with people, cutting their hair, providing a service. You have to be people together to do that. You can't do that remotely at all. So one of the first things that I saw in our industry, what people were trying to do is they were selling their hair products that they had. And luckily, I've had a website that always had a web store in the back. I just never used it. So as soon as I saw that people were doing that, I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to load up all my stuff. And so that worked out really, really well. And then from there, I managed to find a place that was like a wholesale website that allowed you to have net 60 days. So you don't have to, you can order all the stuff. You don't have to prepay any of it. There's free returns, all that. So that made it really easy for me to bring in other products and start trying to sell it. And so I went from selling hair products to shave products to bath and body products to a little bit of clothing and jewelry, and now it's just morphed into this whole, like, I want to make it a whole legit boutique. And by December of last year, I decided that this is a full-fledged thing and we're going to separate it. It's its own company. So it's really finding an opportunity that's there and running with it. So it's been really fun. Our clients are loving it. Our clients that have been here for a long time, they love it.
The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
So asking this morning, climate change, Conservative Party, virtual convention. Should the Conservatives have a serious election proposal about fighting climate change? How important is it for you that the Conservatives take this issue seriously? Is it very important? Is it somewhat important? You know, is it not important at all? I feel like I should be doing touch-tone phone polling here. Okay, press 1, press 2, press 3. But then, it's one thing to ask that, and then you have to ask yourself, what kind of policy should the Conservatives have? Should they go all in? This is kind of the daylight between, say, Liberals and Conservatives right now. The Conservatives have a convention, and delegates vote against the suggestion that climate change is real. The Liberals and the New Democrats, they declare an emergency. Not only is it real, right? It's an emergency. Those parties, the Liberals and the New Democrats, they had dueling motions in the House of Commons declaring a climate emergency. Remember, they did the same thing at Ottawa City Hall, right? Declared a climate emergency. The Conservative base can't even recognize climate change is real, or so the story goes. Should the Conservatives have a carbon tax? Remember, that was in the paper a few weeks ago. Conservatives mulling a carbon tax, or O'Toole mulling a carbon tax. The Trudeau carbon tax, by the way, the one imposed on the provinces that didn't already have a carbon tax, that's going to be decided by the Supreme Court of Canada this week on Thursday. So on climate change and the Conservatives, what about this goal, right? Net zero on carbon emissions by the year 2050. You think that's something the Conservatives need to do in order to have any shot of winning the next election? Those are things, all the other parties have done that. They vowed to tackle the climate crisis, right? And spare no expense doing so. The Conservatives are the outliers. And a lot of people are writing this morning that means they're the party of a bygone era. Certainly the Liberals are going to say that. And as long as this is their stance on climate change, the hard no on climate change, they'll be in opposition forever. That's what some people are saying. I want to know what you think, though. Let's go. Robert Leitrim, good morning.
Morning.
Yes, sir.
On climate change.
On climate change, yes.
Do you not think taking 1,000 acres of farmland and bush and turning it all into houses isn't affecting the climate change?
It maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
Have you ever? Why is the city always warmer than it is out in the country?
There's a lot of asphalt in the city, right? Yeah,
that's
sure.
right. You pave over the roads, you build houses. They all put out heat.
Sure. Yeah.
So why are they allowing all this bush and farmland to be cleared and built into houses,
right?
If they're worried about climate change.
Okay. I get where you're going with that. Development and sprawl and all of this stuff, Robert. But
that's right.
I guess my question is a little more focused right now.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the Conservative Party.
Yes, well,
they have a motion at their.
If they don't do something, but they got to stop going after the people to get the money to do it.
Okay. Then who should they go after then? Then who should they go after?
If you went after the car manufacturers and told them that every vehicle, say a pickup truck, if it didn't get 40 miles to the gallon, you can't sell that truck. How much would that help the climate change if every vehicle on the road got at least 40 miles to the gallon?
If you're paying attention to the auto sector, Robert, it seems the industry is moving in that direction anyway. Right?
Yes, but they're not moving fast enough.
I had the president, you said F-150, I had the president of Ford Motor Canada on my show a few weeks ago. What is it? The year 2035, every Ford is going to be electric.
Yeah, well, where's the electricity going to come from?
Well, I also
we're never going to produce enough electricity.
Well, you say that because the people in Ontario have been worried about that. And then I had the head of the Ontario Engineering Association on my show who said we have plenty of electricity to do it in Ontario. We have a massive surplus of electricity, Robert. That's why we didn't need to build those blasted windmills and solar panels. Where have you been for the last 10 years, man?
I heard that.
Oh, come on. Go away. Get off my radio. You're bugging me this morning. Chris in Elmont.
Hi, Rob.
Yeah.
I remember there was a poll done.
You have a sedative, Chris? Can you give me a sedative, okay? Drive down here and give me a sedative, will you? All right.
I remember there was a poll done a couple of years ago where they asked, how much more would you pay for climate change?
Yeah.
And I think the answer was $100 a year.
Yeah, and it wasn't much more than that. And a large percentage said nothing.
Well, the thing is that...
a very popular answer was nothing. Yeah, it's serious, but I'm not going to... Don't expect me to pay for it.
Well, the thing is that sentiment is very much alive and well. And I think O'Toole's headed in the right direction because You know, it's not an emergency for starters. If we go $170 a ton for carbon, I mean, it's going to be 50 cents, 60 cents a liter more for gas.
Right.
If we bring in the Clean Energy Act, the one where fuels are
the Clean Fuel Standard, Clean Fuel Standard.
It's another 50 cents. So it's $1 more a liter, $2.20 a liter, $2.50 a liter. And, you know, they're already starting to see the effects of this clean energy stuff in the States. I mean, the various states are getting together to basically sue the government, okay? And it's going to go to the American Supreme Court. It's states' rights. We have already provinces, in effect, taking on the carbon tax.
Well, it's going to be ruled on Thursday by the Supreme Court of Canada.
What happens if the Supreme Court says, yeah, it is a provincial responsibility? No, don't do it.
Well, that will be a big victory. That will be a big victory for provincial rights, right?
But I mean, it's the whole thing is converging. It's all converging on a point where enough is enough.
Right. So you think O'Toole is on the right track here?
I think his base has put him on the right track.
His base because of the base. Okay, all right.
He's not going to do a carbon tax. He's probably going to revisit that clean energy thing. I mean, you know, car manufacturers are also starting to wonder. Toyota, which is one of the biggest ones in the world, has said, we don't see it happening, that everything goes to electricity.
Okay. All right.
Power generation would have to increase, electric power generation would have to increase by twofold.
I don't know, Chris. That's not what because I had that same question. If everybody is driving an electric car in Ontario, do we even have enough electricity? I had the head of the Society of Engineers, professional engineers in Ontario, who said it's not an issue. We've run the numbers. We have plenty of electricity in Ontario. Marie.
Good morning,
Morning,
Bob,
Marie.
welcome back.
Thank you.
Nice to have you back.
Yep, thank you.
Excuse me. I was did the convention on the weekend virtually, of course, and I think that O'Toole has to come up with some kind of a plan on climate. It seems to be the thing that people want, or a lot of people. I just find that there's a few things that we're wishy-washy on, and this group says this, and like we can't ever seem to get it all together. I don't know a lot about climate change. I know a little bit, but I do know that he has to have some kind of a plan.
He has to have a policy. Okay.
Sure,
all
he
right.
has.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to.
Okay.
So that's my opinion.
Good stuff, Marie. Thank you for calling. We're going to take one more first-time caller. Justin. Good morning, Justin.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, good to hear you've calmed down a little there.
I get worked up from time to time. It happens, So
It happens.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about the Conservatives.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, they have just handed the Liberal another minority government.
Another minority government. Okay. All right. Yeah.
The Bloc will pick up more seats. The NDP will pick up more seats. The Conservatives will probably stay maybe a little bit where they are, but they're going to lose a little bit. And as soon as that happens, the whole Conservative Party is going to roll over on O'Toole. He's gone.
He's done. Okay. All right. Okay.
And I don't think there's a problem with teachers. They get paid, I think, the right amount.
The right amount. Okay. 1 in 4 are making $100,000 minimum. So? 1 in 4 people where you work, Justin, make $100,000 a year?
Well, I used to work in the government.
Well,
so
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
They do.
Yeah, I guess that's the way it works in the government, but somebody has to pay those bills, okay? And it's $100,000 a year with 3 months off. It's $100,000 a year with gold-plated benefits, and it's $100,000 a year with pensions that start at $50,000.
Yeah.
The province is running a deficit of $40 billion, and it's $500 billion in debt, sir.
But they're babysitting.
Babysitting. Well, you know what? I think we can find a cheaper babysitter. Maybe we could start. Okay. All right. You know what? Let's put jobs out. If it's just babysitting, let's put jobs out on whatever. OttawaJobShop.ca or whatever. Okay? Babysitter wanted. Starts at $30,000 a year. You must work all year. 12 months of the year. No pension. We'd still have people applying. They cut off their arms and legs to get that job. Andrew Boyle's one of them. He's coming up at 11 o'clock with the news. This is City News.
Local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, March 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, it's 7 degrees, 11 in Smiths Falls, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Latest COVID-19 case numbers across the province show 1,699 additional cases today. 85 of them are in Ottawa, 12 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 39 more in Eastern Ontario, 4 more in Renfrew. 500 of these new cases are in Toronto. There are also 3 more deaths being reported by the province. Ontario's COVID-19 cases continue to rise after stabilizing in February, and a member of the province's vaccine task force is breaking down why we stand where we do. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
Dr. Isaac Bogoch feels the 7-day case average is the best metric to determine the province's status, along with hospital and ICU capacity. He explains intensive care units didn't decompress from the last wave as much as it needed to, which doesn't give the wiggle room to care for the population. Dr. Bogoch tells the Rob Snow Show the surge in cases shouldn't come as a surprise.
We haven't vaccinated a significant proportion of our population, so most of us are still susceptible because most of us are not immune either from natural infection and recovery or from vaccination. And, you know, you've got opportunities to put more and more people indoors.
He adds, while it's important to respect the variants of concern, transmission will happen whenever someone lets their guard down, and says moving people outdoors is the safest option. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News time, 11:03, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Temperatures well above average again today. Lots of sunshine, very mild. The high near 17 degrees. The average high is about 4 or 5 degrees. Tonight, mainly clear, -1, and tomorrow, sun and clouds, 17. That's the high today, 17.
And right now in Smiths Falls, it's 11 degrees, and in Ottawa, it's 7. City News time, 11:04. With the trial of Michael Kovrig ending today with no verdict, a former senior Canadian diplomat says it's time for our country to take action against the Chinese government. Both Kovrig and Michael Spavor arrested in 2018, apparent retaliation for Canada's detention of Huawei executive wanted in the United States. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
It's now time for Canada to act and take
sanctions.
That's Colin Robertson, a vice president at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute and a former diplomat who served in Hong Kong. With verdicts pending in both trials, the human rights of both men being breached and China's conviction rate at 99%, he says it's clear both men will be found guilty and Canada needs to act. He suggests a possible boycott of the Beijing Olympics, financial sanctions against Chinese officials involved in these cases, and barring family of Communist Party officials from studying in our country.
I think we might also consider publishing the assets held by Chinese individuals in Canada. That would get them squirming in Beijing.
Robertson says Canada can't act alone. We need our closest allies and other democracies to join in to send a clear message to China. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
And I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
As you just heard in our newscast, not really clear what happened at today's trial for former Canadian diplomat. Shouldn't forget he's a former Canadian diplomat, Michael Kovrig. Canadian Embassy's Deputy Chief of Mission was informed when the trial started, but Jim Nicol remained outside the courthouse until after dark waiting for information. He was barred from going into the courtroom, as he was on Friday when Michael Spavor was put on trial as well. The Foreign Minister, Mark Garneau, thanked 26 countries, including the United States and the UK. They sent representatives to the courthouse to show their support. He says the eyes of the world are on these cases and on these proceedings. Now, Geoffrey Johnston writes about international affairs, has followed all of this closely for the Kingston Whig-Standard, and is here every Monday morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
How do you see all of this resolving itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. First off, I want to say that it was very heartening to see so many diplomats at the trials of the two Michaels standing outside, demanding transparency, standing in solidarity, because China all the way along has been trying to intimidate Canada and use its superior power to isolate us and intimidate us. And the fact that foreign diplomats stood in solidarity with Canada against the Chinese regime is very important, because Canada cannot resolve this issue on its own. And the only thing that's going to get the two Michaels back will be a multilateral campaign. If they do convict them, and if they're, the Chinese judicial system is not fair. These are not actual trials, because, a real trial would be more than 4 hours. They have a conviction rate close to 100%. So they are kangaroo courts. These are show trials, and it's nothing but political hostage taking. It's hostage diplomacy. So if we've got the international community's got to make it clear that China cannot take people hostage, and if they take people hostage, there will be severe consequences. Important that so many countries are signing on to this Canadian-led initiative, this declaration against arbitrary arrest and detention that condemns the use of innocent people as political bargaining chips. So the way I see it ending is this. The international community makes it very clear to China that we're not going to do business with China as usual if they're going to do this kind of thing. And so there are going to be sanctions. There are going to have to be possibly expulsions. There's just going to have to be a boycott of the Olympics and a whole raft of international initiatives, because you cannot do business with a regime that it arbitrarily scoops people up and arrests them. Who's going to go over there and do a business deal if they're going to get arrested? Who's going to go go on a tourist junket in China if you can be arrested and used as a pawn? So I think it's going to end when the international community really gets tough with China.
But it would take a multilateral approach, you're saying?
Yeah, Canada can't do it alone.
Can't do it alone?
No.
Can it do it just with the United States? though?
I think it needs to be the international community. Now, I'm very heartened by the Biden administration. So the Biden administration recently had a summit in Alaska with the Chinese, and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made it very clear that the United States is going to consider the two Michaels, treat them as if they were Americans. And so this means that this is a top priority for the United States, and they've said that publicly. So that's really good news. But I think it's really got to be an international effort. And what was significant also is that representatives from the European Union showed up to Michael Kovrich's trial outside, and the Chinese do a lot of business in Europe. So this has got to have this must have grabbed the Chinese regime's attention. And by the way, when we talk about this, we're talking about the communist regime that rules and oppresses China. And when we speak out against the Chinese regime, we're not attacking the Chinese people. We're actually speaking out in favor of human rights and giving the Chinese people breathing room. Because when we speak out in favor of human rights, it's good for the Chinese people.
I guess what I want to get at is, could it be resolved by basically a prisoner swap, Geoffrey? Meng Wanzhou is freed from Canada, allowed to hop on a plane, go back to China. The Huawei executive being held here at the request of the Americans for extradition to the United States. She's free. The two Michaels come home. Could it be that easy, or is that a potential solution?
Could it be that easy?
Yeah.
Yes, it could be that easy if the Biden administration were so inclined, but I don't think they are, because there are a lot of moving pieces in this, because Meng Wanzhou was arrested at the request of the Americans because Huawei and Meng Wanzhou allegedly violated the Iran sanctions regime, and the United States is right now trying to reel in Iran's nuclear program, and they don't want that regime to unravel. So I don't know if the Americans are willing to do that. Also, if the Americans did that, then that would just encourage hostage diplomacy, because it wouldn't just be China, it would be other regimes that also engage in that kind of thing. And we're trying to go in the opposite direction. What may actually happen is this international display of solidarity may have actually shocked Beijing, and you may see at some point they're going to announce the conviction of these two Canadian citizens, and then they're going to be quietly released. This is what could happen if we ratchet up the pressure. Because the thing is, when you're dealing with this kind of rogue behavior, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a regime that's not adhering to international norms, rules, or conventions. If you give into it, then you're just drawing further aggression. And we just don't want to go through this again in 12 months with somebody else. And, I understand the families really want these two gentlemen back, and I want them back too, but let's not go through this again in a year's time.
All right. Your latest column for the Kingston Whig-Standard is about the progress that has been made historically to achieve zero hunger and really fight against malnutrition. And the last year has done great harm to that mission. Maybe explain a little bit more. Tell us what you're writing about, Geoffrey.
Yes. So as bad as the pandemic has been for us, it is much worse in low and middle income countries. And in 2015, the world came together at the United Nations to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals. And two of those goals were to end hunger and malnutrition by 2030. And the pandemic has undone a decade of progress on hunger and malnutrition, especially when we're looking at children. So because of the economic consequences and the disruption to supply chains and remittances, we're seeing increases in hunger, which means people just don't have enough food to eat, and malnutrition, which means even if their bellies are full, they're not getting the micronutrients they need. So we're seeing a rise in wasting among children, stunting, and cognitive development problems. And so the bottom line is this: if we're going to meet those Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, countries like Canada are going to have to increase our international development aid to make sure that people have enough to eat, but they also get the right kind of micronutrients.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
For coming on today. It's always great to have you as part of our program. Geoffrey Johnston from the Kingston Whig-Standard, David Sali from the Ottawa Business Journal is coming up next here on The Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
The Rob Snow.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online. And the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Let's go over some of the big local business news stories this week. David Sali is back from the Ottawa Business Journal. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
We've been following with your help, David, the evolution of Ottawa as a real e-commerce hub, and for example, the Amazon warehouse not far from where I am here in the southern East End, the new one that's being built out in Barrhaven, which I believe you said on our show one time, the largest private building in all of Ottawa, right? When they finished that one.
That's right.
Yeah. And one of the stories for the Ottawa Business Journal this week is about how some national real estate firms really see a lot of opportunity here in that segment here in Ottawa, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. In fact, last week I spoke to the CEO of a Montreal real estate investment trust, ProREIT, because they're buying. They're one of a couple of companies that are starting to really dip their feet into the industrial market here in Ottawa. They're buying 3 industrial buildings, a total of about 280,000 square feet. And they're not releasing full details yet. Due diligence is still happening, so the deal hasn't closed. But they did say they're close to highway to the 417 and major arterial roads, and they're already 96% leased to a bunch of different clients. So these are quite desirable buildings from a landlord's perspective. They're almost full. The rent is coming in, and what the interesting thing about this conversation was talking to James Beckerleg. His name is. He's the CEO and co-founder of ProREIT, and he just mentioned that they're really bullish on the Ottawa market. They've got a few other office building holdings, 251 Laurier Avenue. They bought that about a year and a half ago. A 500 Palladium Drive in Canada, where there's a few tech firms in that building. But they're really looking to get more into the industrial space because, as he said, Ottawa is really this emerging player in warehouse distribution space, thanks to it being halfway basically, or between Toronto and Montreal. You've got the 2 biggest markets in Canada. Ottawa's right here, close to major highways. It's a very attractive proposition to have industrial warehouse space in an area like this. So he's really high on Ottawa. Right. He thinks they're going to keep making more investments here, and if the land can be found for development, if more gets freed up, he sees a lot more construction.
But your story, this story would suggest to me, for example, this is a little bit different than, say, Broccolini doing something purpose-built for Amazon. This suggests to me that this idea that we're a distribution hub, it's more than just putting shelf space into big warehouses, right? It's about the firms that are involved in that business as well. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's because as you say, the most of the industrial space in Ottawa isn't occupied by warehouses. It's it is other all kinds of different
mixed-use industrial.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's what they're buying because, as he puts it, the rising tide sort of floats all boats, right? So, as e-commerce, that side of the market evolves, all of the other aspects of the industrial market are also going to keep growing and developing. So, because this is a space that hasn't really. Not much has happened in the Ottawa industrial space until Amazon for 30 years. There was almost no new construction. So now all of a sudden it's kind of like it's a reawakened things here, in the industrial market, and people are now looking, going, Ottawa's a great space. The market has a big upside, and all kinds of companies want to get on board.
Good. So that's the good news of the Ottawa Business Journal. The bad news is what's going on with Porter Airlines and the Ottawa operations for the airport. What's going on with Porter?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. So, we all know about the woes of the airline industry right now, right? It is not exactly flying high, so to speak. It's very. This has been the worst year. I think Air Canada's CEO in their last quarterly report called it the worst year in the history of the aviation industry for obvious reasons. Just nobody's traveling right now. Airlines are hurting. Airports are hurting, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago. You talked to Mark LaRoche from the airport. I spoke to him. They're facing a huge deficit, and this is really hitting the airline hard. And Porter, one of the main carriers that out of Ottawa's airport, it told me last week it is going to be laying off about 20% of its Ottawa-based employees, mostly baggage handlers.
Okay.
And they're just going to contract out that service once they resume flying. There has not been a Porter plane in the air since last March, and they now hope to resume flying around May 19th. And at that point, they will they will be hiring a third-party contractor to handle all the baggage services in Ottawa. And they say they hope to hire some of those laid-off employees, or they hope that the contractor will hire some of them back. But it's hard to say, and it's just, and right now they're saying that's the extent of the layoffs, and they hope to bring everybody else back. They had about 100 people before this announcement, so we'll see. But this is surely not the last we're going to hear of layoffs in the airline industry. That's for sure.
It's just brutal. Like when you speak to people who are involved with the Ottawa airport. You mentioned Mark LaRoche. I had Krista Keeley on. There's almost nobody at the airport now. Where they used to have whatever it was, 150 flights, they might have a dozen every day now. Where the number of people working at the airport is down like 80%. It's just, and that terminal that they're building for light rail, they don't even have the money to build the terminal. We could have the tracks go for light rail to the airport. There's actually no terminal to get off at the airport. It's going to be like, just
here you go.
Tracks to nowhere, Yeah, incredible.
Exactly.
So, anyway, let's close on this, David. Another kind of upside story. FinTech is like financial technology services, right? That's what FinTech is? Right. So there's a Florida-based company that's putting some money into an Ottawa-based company. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, sure, Rob. Yeah, this is an interesting story. It got a lot of traction last week on our website. Very, very popular story for good reason. Because it's another Ottawa tech company that's made good. They're called FuseBill, and they are in the, as you said, the fintech space. They make a subscription billing platform, so they help. They basically help companies that bill their services by the month. They help them manage all their billing services, and they've been around for about 10 years. And they're really aimed at small and medium-sized businesses. So they've got tons of customers, and their revenues have grown more than 150% in the past 3 years. So they're really booming, and they last week announced that a Florida company has now purchased a majority stake in FuseBill. The Florida company's interesting name, Fat Merchant. They're based in Orlando, and they do payment processing software. So if you're buying something, whether it's by credit card, online, they make the technology that helps make sure that money gets to the merchant. And they've been around for about 7 years, and they're growing like crazy as well, one of Central Florida's fastest growing companies. And they just felt this was a natural fit. You've got a payments processing company. Let's join forces with a billing management company. And so very complementary. So both sides seem to be really happy about this.
Good.
Tyler Amy, the FuseBill CEO, he just says this is going to help open new markets for them and kind of take them to the next level, hopefully. So sounds like a good news story, Rob.
Thank you so much for the update today, David Sali, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Yep. David Sali from the Ottawa Business Journal. We'll look back at the Conservative Party's policy convention coming up right after the 11:30 news with the help of Tim Powers from Summa Strategies here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, March 22nd. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buck, and right now in Ottawa, gorgeous sunshine and 12 degrees. Smiths Falls, sunny and 13. Here's what's making news right now. Provincial health officials reporting 85 new cases of COVID-19 in Ottawa out of just under 1,700 across the province. Public Health Ontario reports 3 more people have died in this province due to the virus. Elsewhere locally, 39 new cases in Eastern Ontario. Leeds, Grenville, Lanark has 12 new cases. And there are 4 new cases in Renfrew County, the figures out of over 31,000 tests. Provincial health officials report 333 suspected variants of concern in Ottawa, 78 such cases in Eastern Ontario, 21 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, none for Renfrew County. Those variants to be confirmed by further testing. This comes as the province opens vaccination appointment booking to Ontarians 75 years of age and older. Quebec has lowered the vaccine eligibility in Montreal to those 60 and up as pharmacies in that city begin inoculations today. Health authorities in Quebec announced the change for Montreal late last night, keeping the age limit at 65 and older for the rest of the province. Meantime, about 350 pharmacies are going to join the province's mass vaccination campaign starting today. Quebec is reporting 712 new COVID-19 cases, 15 deaths linked to novel coronavirus, 3 in the past 24 hours. There are 37 new cases in the uOttawa. China did not release any information today on what happened at Canadian Michael Kovrig's trial. Foreign Affairs Minister Mark Garneau says the government is deeply troubled by the total lack of transparency and is continuing to work toward an immediate end to the arbitrary detention of Kovrig and Michael Spauer. The Canadian Embassy's deputy chief of mission remained outside Beijing's number 2 intermediate court after dark, but did not receive any information. China says the trials are being conducted behind closed doors because they involve state secrets. I'm Sarah Buchan. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Canada's Conservatives will enact a comprehensive jobs plan to recover the millions jobs lost during the pandemic within 1 year. And we won't stop there. We will take immediate action on the hardest hit sectors, helping those who've suffered the most, including women and young people. As we work together on our policy platform, the most important question we must ask ourselves is, will this help secure Canada's future? Everything we put forward to Canadians in coming weeks and months must be singularly focused at that.
Okay, so that was the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, the leader of the official opposition, Aaron O'Toole, and his big speech at the Conservative Party National Policy Convention just wrapped up. Let's get some analysis from the chair of Summa Strategies, Tim Powers. Good morning.
Good morning, icon of Ottawa. How are you today?
I love it when you say that. I'm fine. Thank you very much. Yeah.
That's good to be with you.
Tim, let me ask you, what did you think of Aaron O'Toole's speech?
Look, there were elements of it that I thought were good and right, that being his call for Conservatives to recognize that if they want to succeed, they're going to have the courage to change. I think he used the word courage. Somebody told me 20 times, and change an equal number. I think he's right, and that comes from the fact, as he said in his speech, looking at the last 2 election campaigns, you can't just keep doing the same thing repetitively, Rob. Some would say that's the definition of insanity.
Right.
He spelled out some priorities, which reminded me a bit of Harper in approach. You know, Harper had 5 priorities, and O'Toole did as well. And then he tried to weave in some Brian Mulroney talking about apartheid and respect for rights and respect for individuals. So on the whole, I think he tried to do the right things, but it appears to be the case that there, based on some of the things that happened over the weekend, there's, you know, as there is in any exercise of change, there are resistors within the Conservative Party who aren't yet ready to follow along with O'Toole's call for change.
Resistors, revolutionaries.
I don't know
pitchforks
if
and
I call them
torches.
Revolutionaries, but resistors for certain.
Pitchforks and torches, maybe. Tim Powers here. He's chairman of Summa Strategies. When Aaron O'Toole talks about a party that needs to change, what does he think needs to change?
Well, I think he talks about it connecting more with Canadians in urban settings where there is a greater diversity of people, connecting with young people on issues around climate change, and not just young people. I think you saw he does this a lot. This wasn't new. He talks about, he's a kid from Bowmanville. He's just like you, Rob, and me. Yep. And he grew up, and that's how he grew up. He's trying to show that has more in common with most Canadians than, say, Justin Trudeau does. What I found really interesting in those so-called O'Toole 5 priorities, he used the word secure before all of them. And my sense of that is he recognizes that and he was just reporting on it, lots of Canadians still feeling vulnerable because of COVID, and that vulnerability goes across all realms of our lives. And he's trying to say, look, I get that, and I can connect with you. Whether he's believed by Canadians and Conservatives over time is to be determined, and one speech will not change the dial for O'Toole in terms of moving people into his camp.
Right. So in the run-up to the virtual policy convention, there was a lot of talk about what role, what voice, if any, the more religious wing of the party, the so-called SoCons, would have at this convention. There was no big fiery debate on abortion or gay marriage or conversion therapy or any of those big social issues. No relitigation of any of those issues. It appears as though that was, whatever was afoot was successfully quieted. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I think that's true. You've covered many conservative policy conventions. Rob, there's always a lot of noise beforehand. There's always tantrums and torquing, and the third T truth, though, often is seen at the end of it all, and it's not often as exciting that there was no dramatic departure from things. I would argue the most dramatic and frustrating for me, and I think many Canadians, was the fact that Conservative members decided not to acknowledge the reality of climate change. That's probably the most dramatic, and that's overusing it here, thing that happened this weekend, because that has given the Liberals and other opponents of the Conservatives ammunition to say, hey, Aaron O'Toole can say what he wants, but his own party voted against that, and that probably was the biggest development this weekend.
Yeah. How damaging is that, do you think, for this party?
Well, it depends. Where does O'Toole go from here, right? And if he lives by his words of courage and trying to make change, then he's got to lead the party and some of those resistors to that place. He's right on that part. And look, I come from an oil-producing region, as do you, and we would like to see our oil resources maximized for as long as they can. But equally, you start to hear more people in our part of the world and everywhere in Canada talking about, look, climate change is real. The corporations are getting there. Why can't Conservative members get there and understanding that this needs real work?
Well, I would like to know, and maybe you can help us out with one of the most recent polls done on federal politics was by your friends and colleagues at Abacus Data, for example. Yep. If what I wonder is, because the Conservatives are very much the outlier when it comes to the climate file. Yep. All the other parties have, they want carbon pricing and declaring climate emergencies and all of this other stuff. How many people would be actually willing to give the Conservatives a serious look to the point where they might switch from red to blue or even from orange to blue, which happens, if the Conservatives actually took the climate files more seriously?
I can't remember right off the top of my head, but there's 25. I think it's around 25% of Canadians who don't naturally vote for the Conservatives would consider them if climate policy if there were substantive climate policy, and that doesn't mean just saying Trudeau's carbon taxes suck and you just simply put a price on big emitters. It's more to it than that. So there's a pool of voters out there. We've been working with at Summa with different environmental groups who've been polling Conservatives to get a sense of where they are or would be Conservatives. And again, depending where you poll, and even in the West, look at some of the stuff Leger has released. People who identify as Conservatives or could be predisposed to vote Conservatives are saying in larger numbers now that yes, climate change policy has to be real and substantial. It just can't be a great talking point like the gun registry was for years to raise money for the Conservatives. Great to have the money, but if you can't win, you can't win. And that's coming up in a lot of different polls, the importance of climate change for Conservative-disposed voters.
Okay. Thank you for this morning. Great to hear from you.
Good to talk to you, my friend. Talk
all
soon.
as well. Yep, the chair of Summa Strategies. That is Tim Powers. So coming up, we'll take politics and the environment. It is certainly a big week on that file because this week is decision week at the Supreme Court of Canada on Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax, the one imposed on provinces that did not already have a mechanism to price 1 ton of carbon. Can the federal government impose a carbon tax on a province even if it doesn't want one? If you're keeping score at home, the Alberta Court of Appeal ruled last year that this carbon tax is unconstitutional. The Ontario and Saskatchewan Courts of Appeal went the other way and said that the carbon tax is constitutional. So it's all up to the Supremes now, and the decision, I believe it's Thursday morning. Comes down Thursday morning, be right in the middle of our show. The thrust of it was from the Alberta Court of Appeal, the thrust of that ruling was butt out. Get out of our business. Stay out of our business. The federal government can't tell the provincial government what to do when it comes to fighting climate change with the carbon tax. That the federal government, by forcing provinces to enact a carbon tax, is imposing federal power where it has no authority to impose federal power. And then it went over, these are all the ways that violates the Canadian Constitution. And I went back into my archives this morning. I read some of the lines in that ruling, and let me tell you, there's some killer lines in there. And if nothing else, that ruling from the Alberta Court of Appeal offers a history lesson, a kind of a civics lesson on how this country was created and why we have this system that we do called federalism. For example, paragraph 22, this is the Alberta Court of Appeal on the Trudeau carbon tax legislation. Quote, it is a constitutional Trojan horse. Buried within it are wide-ranging discretionary powers the federal government has reserved unto itself. Their final shape, substance, and outer limits have not yet been revealed. Paragraph 334. It purports to be neutral, the Trudeau price on carbon, price on pollution. It purports to be neutral, but has a disproportionate negative impact on certain provinces and their citizens. It does not take into account regional differences in terms of inclemency of weather, more cost to end users to heat their homes, longer travel distances for work and transport of goods, or the sparseness of population, nor does the Act account for lack of economies of scale, which would otherwise be available to larger population sentences. And then this. If this Act is a valid law, this is the Alberta Court of Appeal, okay? And remember, the other courts of appeal, Ontario and Saskatchewan, this was not their view. They viewed it constitutional, and that's why it's at the highest court. But this, in Alberta, this was the Court of Appeal. If this Act is a valid law, The constitutional foundation for provincial governments is badly damaged, and their future as an important level of government is in jeopardy. Tomorrow, Parliament could pass a law prohibiting Albertans from heating their homes above 16 degrees. Driving gasoline-powered motor vehicles, raising cattle, the source of not only meat and dairy products, but methane, a greenhouse gas that is particularly harmful to the environment, or any other activity that the federal government believes contributes to greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. Federalism, as we have known it for over 150 years, is over. That was the Alberta Court of Appeal. Not a fan. But not the final word on the matter. That comes Thursday from the Supreme Court of Canada. We'll get you ready for that coming up next. We'll go to the Centre for Environmental Law and Global Sustainability at the University of Ottawa. Coming right up on The Rob Snow Show here on City News.
When you've lost your breasts, you've sort of lost part of yourself. And then all at once you're losing your hair. You don't know who you are anymore. You want to feel like yourself again. So I think that the store, a mastectomy store, is essential because you've lost your identity. And then all at once you're looking for a wig, you need a headscarf, you need a camisole. There's nowhere to go, there's no one to talk to. This should be essential because there are more and more women that are getting breast cancer. I think it's 1 in 6. They're becoming younger. I have a client that's 18 years old. And where do they go? They need a place like this that the women that work there understand. They know what you're going through. It's changed quite a bit. Our hours are different. We're now open from 10 to 5. We're not as busy as we were. A lot of women are afraid to go out. They're afraid that maybe there are more people in the store. So that's why I try and let them know you are alone. There's absolutely nobody in the store except you and I. If there is a woman that she's very afraid, I will lock the door to make sure nobody else comes in. I'll put a sign back in 10-15 minutes just to give her that reassurance. Before we would have 4, 5, 6 people in the store. We didn't have to turn anybody away. Now we do. Some clients do leave and they're upset because they're in the store. They said, you know, we drove 20 minutes and now we're not allowed in the store. And I try to make them understand that there's somebody in here that's going through chemo or radiation. So that's sort of changed a lot, that we're not able to have more people in the store.
If we're talking about products, there's the bras that are adapted for mastectomy. The bathing suits that are adapted to mastectomy. We have special camisoles as well, and post-surgery bras. And then we have, for women going through chemo, the wigs that we have a big selection in the store as well. We have scarves. Some women don't feel comfortable wearing a wig. They prefer to wear a scarf or a hat, so we have a huge selection of that as well. We offer compression garments as well. When you're going through a mastectomy, you might have lymphedema in your arms after a couple of years, and you have flare-ups. So we have the sleeves, the hand as well that can be covered. We show each other's our scar. We talk about the treatments, how we felt, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. That's what makes us special. We have an added value in this store. Besides everything that's in the store, that's a product that can handle any problem that a client might have. Me and Linda, we've been through. We know how it feels in our bodies.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
So Thursday's the big day for the Trudeau carbon tax. Is it unconstitutional or not? Supreme Court of Canada will come down with its ruling. Nathalie Chalifour joins me now. Professor, University of Ottawa Centre for Environmental Law and Global Sustainability. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Rob.
Oh, big day, right? Big week. Big week.
It will be.
Yeah. Remind us how this all came to pass, that we are where we are with the price on pollution.
Okay, so as you your listeners probably know, when the federal government implemented its carbon price in 2018, the constitutionality of it was challenged by 3 provinces. So Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan all challenged it on the basis of an argument that it was unconstitutional. So we got decisions from 3 courts of appeal, 2 ruling it constitutional, 1 ruling it unconstitutional, and of course that's gone up to the Supreme Court, who heard the case in September and now have just announced that they'll be releasing their decision on Thursday.
Right. So what case did the provinces make leading up to this in their bids to try and get this levy deemed unconstitutional? What case were they making?
So the main argument made by the provinces, and of course there were some differences between them, but as a whole, their concern was about the way the federal government was trying to justify this legislation. They relied on a type of power in the Constitution known as POG, or Peace, Order, and Good Government. And the provinces argued that if that legislation were to be upheld under this POG power, it would upset the balance of powers in the Federation. They argued that it would take away jurisdiction in the provinces to do their own carbon pricing and other actions related to greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And they said that as a result, it would be too pro-federal, pro-central, and it should be ruled unconstitutional. So that, in a nutshell, was their argument.
Right. So peace, order, and good government. In fact, I've just been reading for the listeners a few lines from the Alberta Court of Appeal ruling, because as you say, 3 provinces challenged it. The provinces only won at one of those courts, right? So,
that's right, yeah.
Saskatchewan and Ontario, the provincial argument is not the one that carried the day, but in Alberta, that Court of Appeal said the federal government cannot rely on the national concern branch of POG to take over matters which have consistently been held to lie within exclusive provincial jurisdiction. And that's what carried the day in the province of Alberta, but again, not the other 2 provinces. So
that's right. And that you've honed in on, one of the key points that is up for debate and was argued before the Supreme Court. And it's the extent to which, if the court was to uphold this legislation under this POG power, would that mean that provinces no longer have jurisdiction to implement their own GHG reductions policies? And that's what the Alberta Court of Appeal held. They said, yes, that would actually take something away from the provinces, whereas the Ontario and the Saskatchewan court said it doesn't take anything away, it's complementary, and they ruled that there's space in the Constitution for both provinces and the federal government to enact a carbon price within their own spheres of jurisdiction. So that's a big debate that was put before the Supreme Court, and we're going to find out on Thursday how the Supreme Court views the question.
Yeah, and when it comes to this power, peace, order, and good government, would it also not be part of the case for the federal side? This would be part of the argument is, look, climate change is such pan-Canadian concern, global concern, that we need to use the federal power, the laws for the peace, order, and good government of Canada to establish national standards on the pricing of greenhouse gases. Because what this is it's always been described as a backstop, right? It's the federal backstop. It only exists if provinces refuse to do their own thing. They still have the power to do their own thing, except not do anything, right? So yeah.
That's exactly right. And that's why, I mean, the legislation was designed in a way that was a filler. So if jurisdictions either chose not to price because it's complicated to enact a system in their jurisdiction, like for instance, in some of the territories, they don't want to go through the trouble of setting up the levy, so they prefer the federal government to do it for them.
Right.
And in other cases, it's a question of simply disagreeing on how to go about dealing with greenhouse gas emissions and not wanting to enact a price. And in that case, the federal backstop would apply. But the whole idea was for provinces to take the lead. And in fact, when this measure was passed by the federal government, over 80% of emissions in Canada were already subject to a carbon price through provincial programs. So they were really trying to fill in the holes that were remaining and make sure that there was a level playing field across the jurisdictions. So, it's meant to be a backstop, and it was meant to apply only where there were gaps.
Okay. Professor, is it going to be ruled on essentially only through the constitutionality of it, or when the case is made, arguing, say, for this price on carbon, is the case also being made about, well, this is what the United Nations says, and this is what these scientific reports say, and our parliament has declared a climate emergency, these other issues that aren't necessarily part of the Constitution Act, and this is what's in Section 91, and this is what's in Section 92, and the nitty-gritty of the Canadian Constitution?
So you're right. I mean, the question that was posed to the court, this is what's called a reference. So basically the provinces are asking the court to answer this question. Right. And the question they asked is this law constitutional or not? So they didn't ask, is climate change real? They didn't ask, is this the best policy to go about? Because they can't really ask the court those questions. Yeah. But there's no doubt that the court will likely make some statements about the issue, because the evidence that was put forward on the science of climate change and, the policy instruments that can be used to address it and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, there was a lot of evidence put forward to justify the use of a carbon price, because it's known to be effective and fair and efficient, cost effective from a business perspective. So that evidence was put forward, and most of the evidence related to, the science of climate change and the need to reduce emissions wasn't contested. So the court will probably, if you read even the Alberta Court of Appeal decision, which disagreed on the constitutionality, they don't disagree about climate change being an issue and being an important issue. So I suspect the Supreme Court will reiterate the importance of the issue, but then the real nitty-gritty will be in interpreting the powers. And I think what's really important for your listeners and everybody who's looking at this decision to know is this is really about which power the federal government can use to implement this measure. It's not really about whether they have power at all, because they could, if this is struck down, they could go back to the drawing board and redesign it, as a pure tax. They could redesign it as a criminal measure using regulations. So it's more about, can they do it this way? And the court may say, yes, you can. It may say, well, you can do it partly this way, but really not this way.
Or it may say, no, it's unconstitutional, and you have a year to write a new law, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Yep. Nathalie Chalifour with the University of Ottawa's Centre for Environmental Law and Global Sustainability. That is it for the Rob Snow Show. Back tomorrow right after the 9 o'clock news. The Mark